What is up, everyone? It is that time. It is Mock Draft Monday, the best day of the week, except for the fact that it's Monday. But here we are, and I am joined by Trull of the Fantasy Bros. First time on TCR, but someone who's been a part of the community. He's often in the chat. Interact with him on Discord. You've probably heard him if you follow some of the other Cardinals podcasts. He's been on the Redbird Red Zone podcast with our good friend Jackie and Mac. So Aaron, thanks for being here. It's good to have you on here for the first time. Why don't you introduce yourself to everyone if they're not familiar with you and your work?
Hey, so I'm Aaron. We do have a YouTube channel called The Fantasy Bros where me and my brother do fantasy football content. So if you like that, just check it out.
Awesome. And now we were talking a little bit about this before. So you are one state over from me in Alabama, and I'm in Georgia, right? So we're both here representing the Cardinals in the south of the Mason-Dixon line. How did you become a Cardinals fan? I'm always, you were sharing that with me, but I think it's always interesting to me to hear stories from people who aren't originally from Arizona like I am, how you came to be part of this family. So real quick, share with some of the folks in the chat how you became a Cardinals fan.
So being raised in Alabama, we have no professional teams. So I didn't want to go the cliche route of, Saints, Dolphins, Falcons, Titans. Those are the four closest teams that everybody picks from. Didn't want to go that route. So about the time when I got interested in fantasy football, that's the first time I got introduced to the NFL. That was about the time when Carson Palmer and Bruce Arians and everything was, high flying. I was like, okay, the Cardinals are pretty good. I like red. Alabama's my favorite college team. Red for the Cardinals. It's my favorite color. Makes sense. So pick the Cardinals. And then I wasn't a diehard. I didn't watch every game, none of that. And then when David Johnson came in and I really started paying attention to it, I was like, okay, this dude's an animal. And so that's pretty much what supplanted the Cardinals as my team. And
Awesome.
I've been diehard ever since.
Well, we're glad that you're part of the group with us. However you get here, we're glad that you got here. So real quick, I want to say hey to some of the folks that are in the chat. We've got Agent 47. The Cardinals phone will ring a lot, and Indy has the preference, right? Talking about the hope of maybe trading back and adding some draft capital, moving out of 3 and getting some extra picks. Eduardo Bernudo, thank you for being here. Hello, guys. Happy Mock Draft Monday. Appreciate you. We've got Zach Payo time, my favorite Rams fan and YouTuber. Happy Mock Draft Mondays. And he's got a question. Who will be the first quarterback to go in the draft not in the first round? That's an interesting question because, there are the 4 quarterbacks, right, that everyone thinks are going to go, all probably in the first round. Do you have any thoughts? Have you looked at, the rankings and such, who you think is going to be the next quarterback off the board after those 4?
So I believe, at least in the latest PFF mock drafts, it's the Houston quarterback. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head.
So the Houston, he's actually more of a day 3. I think you might be thinking, you're thinking, are you thinking Clayton Tune? Because maybe ESPN had him ranked higher.
My bad. It was Stanford quarterback, Tanner McKee. That's who I was thinking of.
Yeah, so Tanner McKee, right? Austin Hoy in the chat says that, yeah. And then you had, Moore's Legacy says Hendon Hooker is another guy who's, thought of as kind of a borderline day 2, day 3. If Tanner McKee, I think he'll probably go in the second round, but there's a chance he sneaks in the back end of the first round. Mm-hmm. So if Tanner McKee does end up going late in the first round, it could be someone like Hendon Hooker, who's the next one, right? So it could be either one depending on how that goes. So yeah, for sure. Let's say to some of the other folks in the chat. We got Andrew Vinny. Thanks for being here. Have a great mock draft, guys from Australia. Appreciate. We were talking about this before, that how much we appreciate all the Cardinals fans from all around the globe who are part of our community. I always love seeing our Cardinals fan friends from Australia, Germany, Canada, South America. All through South America, Brazil, Argentina. We got Eduardo, I think, is from Brazil, and we got Payo Time from Canada, and then Andrew from Australia. So I love seeing it. So thanks for being here with us. We've got Aaron News. Thanks for being here. Glad to see some Cardinals news, right? Yeah, there's been some news, and we'll get to that in a minute. David Blau going to be our starter. Sadly, he might for week 1. We'll see, right? Jackie says, "Hi, Aaron. Hi, Joe. We getting a uniform upgrade, are we? What? I mean, you've probably heard some of that, right? What do you think? I mean, do you think new uniforms around the corner?"
All signs are pointing to yes. I mean, all the discounted jerseys, kind of rumblings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the Cardinals' masses, I would assume they're not going to like it. They've been clamoring for an upgrade for years. Whenever we get them, they're probably going to have something else to complain about. But
we're kind of an embattled fan base, so yeah, that's for sure. Gary Coker, thanks for being here. David Blau, worst kind of Blau. He's gritty. I like him as a scrappy number 3 quarterback, maybe a low end number 2, but definitely not anyone I'm excited about in terms of being a starter. So let's get into some of the news. We have real quick. Oh, David Jimenez is watching from Disneyland. Wouldn't miss that. That is commitment, David. I appreciate you tuning in from Disneyland on your vacation. Thank you. I hope your family's not mad at you for that. So let's talk about it, right? So free agency, right? Cardinal last mock draft Monday, free agency, the legal tampering period had opened. There wasn't really a lot of news other than we're losing people. So Cardinals fans were a little, frustrated. But we've had some news that has transpired since then. Will Hernandez has been re-signed, a move that I really like. I thought, I know he got injured towards the end, but I think he was solid. I didn't think he'd be too expensive, but he'd be a good, solid offensive lineman, at right guard. So they brought him back. Then there were a couple players that they signed, Kaiser White, Hjaldi Frodholt, and then Devin Strong, defensive, it's kind of a defensive end, defensive lineman. So they got a off-ball linebacker in White. They've got a center guard in Frodholt and like a defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman in Kevin Strong. White is probably going to be a starter in a defense that's going to have some 4-3 concepts. And when they're in the nickel, they'll probably move Simmons maybe to slot a bit and keep Kaiser on there, I imagine. Frodholt, I tweeted out that I think he's probably a guy who can start at center for you if you need him to. But to me, that signals that they're probably going to draft somebody and then have Frodholt start until that they feel confident in that rookie. And then Strong seems like a depth guy. And then we had some more news. Zach Pascal, receiver, an interesting depth player, signed to a 2-year deal. He had experience, he had been with Jonathan Gannon with the Colts and the Eagles, right? So he knows him and what he can do. Really supposed to be a really good blocker, really good, really competitive guy, hyper competitive player. And then obviously talking about David Blau re-signed. So when you look at it all together, this, at least from what I could find, is the list of players that were re-signed and then players that were added from other teams. Kelvin Beachum re-signed, David Blau, Corey Clement, Greg Dortch, Will Hernandez, Matt Prater, and Zeke Turner, the special team sent out. And then added were Hjalti Frodholt. Hayden Howerton is a kind of a undrafted free agent center, if I'm not mistaken, who I don't think he's even played in the NFL, but he's kind of a roster bubble guy that, was a rookie free agent that Austin Fort probably had something to do with bringing into Tennessee. So there's something he must like about him. Zach Pascal, the receiver, who's a taller, bigger receiver. So that's nice. Kevin Strong, depth on the defensive line. Noah Toglai is a tight end from the Eagles, who didn't really play much. So he's sort of a depth kind of roster bubble guy. And then Kaiser White, the linebacker. All right. So that's what I know of thus far. What are your thoughts, Aaron, on free agent so far?
I think it's going exactly to the plan that they wanted to. This roster is not 1 or 2 players away from being competitive. We have a lot of holes. We need a lot of depth. So signing 1 or 2 big name guys wasn't going to cut it. You can't spend half your cap or more on one player like a lot of the fans on Twitter want. The way they're going about it is the smart way, re-sign the good players that we have, such as Will Hernandez, Greg Dortch. I love bringing back Matt Prater. Some may disagree, but I think when healthy, he's still an excellent kicker. Beachum, even though his quotes about Kyler were a little unfortunate, I mean, he's still a serviceable player, and we got him basically for the vet minimum. So you can't really argue with that move. As far as the new players, love Kazir White. Excellent signing. Knows the defensive schemes already. Has worked with the coaches. Feel like he's going to be perfect. Zach Pascal. Love the signing. Finally got some height on our receivers. Assuming DeAndre Hopkins will be traded eventually. Our only other receivers are 5'9" or shorter. So having someone that's 6'2" is going to be a massive help both in run blocking and, pass catching in the red zone and stuff. And then along the offensive and defensive line depths, I feel like that's huge because that's where we've struggled the past few years is Keim never focused on depth. He would always go after one or two superstars, and that's it.
Yeah. Like I also think that this is the right approach. I know it's very frustrating for fans because they want to see, some more solid, signings in terms of players with name recognition, guys that have more of a track record. I had the good opportunity to have an interview with Eric Eager that I posted on my channel and talked a little bit about that. And, he's formerly at PFF. Now he's with Sumer Sports, and they do a lot of analytic stuff on roster building. And I really am intrigued and interested in roster building strategies. And you have to take different approaches based on where your team is at a given point in time. It's not just, you don't just take a let's sign the best players to the most money kind of approach. When you look at free agency, one of the things Eric talked about in the interview is that at the early stages of free agency, most of the players that are signing for money are players at non-premium positions, off-ball linebackers, guards, right? Safeties, but you don't have a lot of elite receivers, elite edge rushers, elite cornerbacks. You get a few of those players once in a while. But it's usually those non-premium positions because you usually want to get you want to get the premium positions to the draft and then fill in holes at the non-premium positions because a really good inside linebacker is not terribly expensive, right? So, with you look at where the Cardinals are at, they've got Kyler's injured. We don't know how much he's going to miss. He might be back early in the season. We'll see. But there's a lot of this is the roster churning turnover point where you're trying to bring in players that are a good fit for the culture and the system. And you're also in this weird situation where you don't have a lot of draft picks that are really working out. You've got a few, but you have to kind of replenish the talent with the draft. And then you've got Kyler's contract is getting expensive next season, right? So it's this weird place where I think the right strategy is to go heavy in the draft, let those rookies play a lot. So in 2024, they've got as much experience as possible. Fill in a few key players that are going to help install the culture and fill a few holes. And then after the draft, there's still some free agency and the post-June 1 cuts. If you maybe add a little bit there, get through 2023, see what you have, right? See which draft picks have panned out. Where do you have some real players? And then 2024 free agency, that's where you go a little more aggressively. And you look at, okay, we filled this spot, and this spot, but this is where we need to upgrade. And then you go from there. But at this point, you want to give as many of those rookies a chance to show they'll be that guy. So, the two players that I think are really key here, you mentioned Kaiser White. I love that signing too. And Froholt is a little bit of an underrated signing. And it's not because he's necessarily the best center, but those, if you're trying to install your offense and your defense, middle linebacker and center are two really good positions to do that with, right? Because your middle linebackers are like the quarterback of the defense. So Kaiser White is going to come in and be able to help with that learning curve with the defense, learning what Jonathan Gannon and Nick Roush want to do, right? He's going to get to be that sort of that quarterback of the defense, and he's familiar with everything they want to do. So that's going to be really helpful. And then the center on the offensive line is kind of the guy who calls out the blocking and the various blitzes and pickups and things like this. And that's kind of the position that's supposed to know the offensive blocking scheme better than anyone else. So that's a player who's also going to help as far as that goes. So they're bringing in guys who they have familiarity with, who will help bring in the culture, install the systems, And then once they've got that established, then they can, then they don't necessarily have to worry about bringing in guys that are from their previous teams. But this year, I think that's helpful. So I agree with that. Let me say hey to some of the other folks there in the chat. Appreciate everyone who's here. Let's see. And Nick says Pascal stays healthy, so here's hoping, right? Andrew Vinny, well said, Aaron. Totally agree. He agrees with you there. Fall Thanos, when did we sign the word Toglai? I'm not sure, but it was Noah Toglai. It was. I did see that news, and it wasn't a major signing, so it didn't get a lot of recognition. But yeah, Brian Perkins, thank you for being here. Joe, I love you, buddy. Thanks for all your hard work, man. I appreciate your support, Brian. You're just really kind and always supportive of everything that we do here, so I really appreciate you. Grandizer in the chat, holding it down, doing the Lord's work. Appreciate you for sure, Grandizer. Thank you for being here. Brian says Kaiser with Zaven and Isaiah is definitely a nasty linebacker group. I mean, that could be quietly one of the better linebacker cores, in the league. If especially in this defense. Mark Jackson, thanks for being here. I have to be on vacation making Mock Draft Monday. Yeah, Mark is a hardest working man in New Mexico. So we appreciate you making time to be with us. CMA, White is not side linebacker. So, okay. With linebackers, the differentiation between inside and outside linebacker is probably not the best differentiation. It's more, are you an edge rusher linebacker or an off-ball linebacker, right? So, like in the 3-4 style defense that we had where Chandler Jones was a linebacker, but he was a edge rusher, right? So in the defense they're running, it's multiple fronts. So they're going to mix it up, but it's a kind of based in a 4-3, but they get some different looks, a lot of different formations. But really what you're looking at is Zaven Collins, Kaiser White, and Isaiah Simmons are inside linebackers, or off-ball linebackers. Now in a true 4-3, you'd say you have your Mike, your middle linebacker, and then your Will and your Sam, your weak side and strong side linebackers that you'll call them outside linebackers, but they're all the same kind of grouping. There's a little bit of differences in their roles and the types of players you want in them, depending on the scheme. But he's a guy who could play middle linebacker, or I think he's probably better suited probably for a Will linebacker, but he could play Sam. They're all kind of those middle linebackers. So, Cannonball, thanks for being here. I like the move so far. I would way rather have a team that plays well together than a team of stat hogs. Complete teams win Super Bowls. Offensive linebacker, CMA. Oh, he's talking about that. Let's see. White was a outside linebacker, was a former safety too. JD Fraughton, thanks for being here. Greetings from Texas. Thanks for all your work. Hey, man, appreciate that. I spent some time in Texas. I was in Fort Worth. I went to grad school at North Texas, so I don't know what part. Let me know what part of Texas you're in. I'm just curious if you don't mind. Calvin, good for Dortch and Hernandez. Yep, definitely glad to have those back. Anyway, all right. Thanks. I wanted to say hey to everyone who's in here, get to those comments and questions. So let's move on, though, to the player profile. Okay, every week I try to introduce a new player, discuss a new player, and kind of introduce someone I think is an interesting prospect for the Cardinals. Now, I have historically been going after day 2 and day 3 prospects, right? Trying to talk about the players that aren't going to get as much hype. But I've deviated from that a little bit. I am going to talk about today someone who's a first-round prospect, but it's someone we haven't talked about a lot, and it's someone who I am becoming increasingly intrigued by as someone who, if the Cardinals look to trade back and get draft capital, someone I think they might consider if they move back somewhere between 7 and 10. And someone I actually really like. He's still a little bit raw, but that's Lucas Van Ness. He's an edge rusher out of Iowa. He's a 21-year-old sophomore. He's 6'5", 269 pounds. People think he's probably a top 15 pick. And, couple of things to note about him. He wasn't technically a starter, but that's not because he wasn't good enough to be a starter. a couple of people have talked about this. So this isn't original to me, but apparently Iowa is really sticklers for starting their upperclassmen, right? That if you're a freshman or a sophomore, you aren't a starter, even if you're the best player, at that position. That they start, they start their juniors and seniors. So he wasn't a starter, but he still played a lot of snaps, right? So the starter is the guy who starts the game, but that doesn't mean, he doesn't get in there. So he played a lot, and he really tore it up at the combine, especially at the movement stuff. He's 6'5", he weighed in at 6'5", 272, and ran a 4.58 40. And that was elite, right? That's for that size. That's really good. And his 10-yard split, 1.57, which really matters for edge rushers, was really good. His shuttle, his 3-cone, which is change of direction, really good. His bench press and his vertical, kind of the power explosion things are not maybe as elite as some of the other measurables, but he's definitely fast. But he also has that power, that speed to power, right? So he's definitely more of a bull rusher at this point. When you look at some of the comparisons in terms of relative athletic score, Ezekiel Ansah, Trey Hendrickson, Jared Allen, Preston Smith, Trayvon Walker. Walker maybe is still, the jury's out on him, but he was the first overall pick. But that's a good list of players that he compares to in terms of athleticism. And PFF, they've got their measurables. Pad level, they say is versatile. He should be versatile defensive line. But he needs to work on developing some additional moves. But his grades are solid. He had 9 sacks. For someone again who came off the bench, so to speak. But when you look at their analysis of him, impressive put together defensive lineman, racked up 270-pound physique. His ability to sink into bull rush is insane. He plays at a ridiculous angle into contact, has the power that you rarely see from only a third-year player. Some of the negatives, wasn't a full-time starter, but I talked about it a little bit before. Has only one move right now, but you can develop that, repetitive play style. That's something, that's a player who needs to develop. But his comparison here is Justin Smith from PFF. And if you're not familiar with Justin Smith, he was a beast of an interior defensive lineman, like an interior pass rusher, drafted by the Bengals, really came to his own with the 49ers. So he is a player, that's the player comp. And that guy was just a nasty, and I don't mean that in a derogatory, just really aggressive player and really good. So Van Ness for me is the guy I look at. If the Cardinals, I think, for example, let's say they trade back a couple times, which is not out of their own possibility, or if they trade back with Tennessee, if Tennessee tries to move up aggressively because they want to get a quarterback, and we move back, we trade back to 11 and get a future first, future second, plus their first, their second, get a haul of picks for that quarterback trade. At 11, I would love Lucas Van Ness somewhere around there. So, Aaron, I know I've kind of monologued there. Do you have any thoughts on Lucas Van Ness as a potential pick for the Cardinals?
So I haven't really deep dove specifically into him, but I know Iowa is known for their defensive line prospects. They always have a solid defense. Anytime a player announces early to the NFL, that's always a plus for him. So he's coming out as a sophomore instead of a junior or senior. So he's younger, only 21 versus, 23, 24, etc. I would say, like you said, the 9 sacks while being a part-time starter is still very impressive. I mean, it's not ungodly numbers, but when you're almost hitting double-digit sacks, I mean, they only play, 12 games in college instead of 17 like the NFL. So, I mean, 9 sacks in 12 games as a part-time starter is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I agree. And I really love a 6'5", he rated in at 272 at the combine. So he's somewhere in that 270 range. He's a guy you look at what Jonathan Gannon wants to do defensively. It's typically those hybrid different fronts, right? We call it a 4-3 base, but they also do, the 4-2-5 defense, and they'll do 3-4. They'll change it up, right? And a guy like him, he has the versatility to play that 3 technique, right? The defensive end in the 3-4 style, but also that 5 technique or further out, that true edge rusher. So you can move them inside and out, and the strength. And man, I just am really intrigued by guys with that kind of versatility for this defense. So, I know a lot of people want Will Anderson, and Will Anderson's a stud, and I wouldn't be upset. I will not be upset if they draft Will Anderson, but if they trade back a little further than people are expecting, right? Get out of like the, somewhere between, 7 and 12 or whatever. I would be pretty happy. I'd be pretty excited really about Van Ness in terms of the physical profile. He's got it all. He's a little bit of a project, but he's a guy who I think is going to be really good. So a couple of it, let's get to some of the comments in the chat about him. Let's see. JD Froughton would love Van Ness. Moore's Legacy is maybe a little cooler on him. He's like, I would draft at least out of the top 9 or top 10. So you'd want to be outside the top 10, right? Agent 47, good player, but even we trade down, I go with cornerback, and I'll tell you, I like taking cornerbacks a lot, but I'm moving more towards the idea that you go cornerbacks on day 2. But that's but listen, I love the cornerbacks at the top of the draft, so I don't hate that. Brian saying it's funny Van Ness getting a lot of Cam Thomas comps. I think they're similar in build. I think Van Ness is a freaker athlete, maybe a little bit, but I think that's not far off. So that's an interesting comp there. Real quick, a couple other comments. JD saying that not too far away in the Dallas area, Wiley to be exact, where Benjamin plays high school ball, and just down the road from Kyler played now and go Carson Ice. I lived in Fort Worth, went to school in Denton. So kind of around there. Patrick Henry, thanks for being here. Greetings from Illinois, Joy. You're doing great. Appreciate that. I have my family, my mother's side of the family is originally from Illinois. I have some cousins there. So awesome. Chris Smith saying the bench rep for Ness is a little concerning me, and that was a little low, no doubt. But I think sometimes guys that are a little taller and lankier don't do as well in the bench press because they have the longer arms. He's clearly I think he's clearly got some physical traits so that you see, when you look at what he's done. I think I use the term speed to power. A lot of people talk about that. And I do think that's a little more what it is. He moves so well. I think he generates that momentum and gets the power through his speed. And then, his strength is maybe not as elite as someone, who puts up 23 or 30 bench reps. But I don't think that's going to be a problem. But I hear that was a little bit low, Chris. So that's the one thing that stands out in that regard. But I think the speed, and I think he's strong enough for an edge rusher. A couple other comments. Brian saying Carter's giving me Robert Kimdiche vibes, right? Yeah, Jalen Carter, boy, he really had a rough pro day, right? Yeah. And so that's a guy who was, for me, is off the board. We talked about that a lot in Discord. Agent 47 said it reminds me of Karlaftis. Yeah, I think a little bit. I think Van Ness is probably a little faster and twitchier than Karlaftis, but maybe a little bit, right? Classy Nasty, thanks for being here. Appreciate you giving the bicep there. So, all right. So, anyway, Lucas Van Ness, I wanted to profile him because he's a guy I've become increasingly intrigued by as someone to take, and I wanted to get him on people's radars. He might not be what everyone's first choice, but he's a guy that if we trade back a bit, I would be interested, right? So yeah, Chris saying I'd also like more knockdowns as well for a guy being 6'5", and that's fair. Like he's definitely got some work to do. He's a little more of a project than some of the other guys ahead of him, and that's why he's not in the top 5. So he's definitely a guy who you look at those physical tools, and he needs to build out his repertoire some, no doubt. So I agree with that. Nicholas, thanks for being here. Nicholas Scanlon saying Miles Murphy would be a solid pick if we trade back to. Absolutely. There's a handful of those guys that I think are really interesting prospects. Van Ness being one of them, but certainly not the only one. Brian saying, Will Anderson somewhat give me fear of turning into Chase Young? Okay. I mean, Chase Young's a nice player, but maybe didn't do as much as people had hoped. So yeah. And, I know a lot of people want to go, with Will Anderson. I'm more of a fan of trading back and taking multiple shots at the lottery tickets, and building more of a deep roster across the board. But that's a longer conversation. But let's get on to, I know Aaron's been so kindly and graciously and patiently listening to me monologue and answer the questions. Let's get to your mock draft. So we're gonna, you prepared a mock draft. So let's get you mock draft, and you can talk about kind of your thought processes with Aaron in terms of why you picked the players and what you were trying to accomplish with this mock draft. And you did get this to me a couple days ago, so I think there might be a few signings that aren't reflected in here. So here we go. Here is Aaron's mock draft. Aaron, I hand the floor over to you.
Okay, so I basically went with my perfect scenario in a sense. So I traded D-Hop to the Giants. There's a couple teams still vying for him. I got a third and a fifth. Honestly, I mean, I know as Cardinals fans that kind of seems insulting, but that's probably the best offer you're going to get, just being realistic. I know we want a first or a second, but realistically, it's probably going to be more like a third and a fifth or a third and a sixth. So I traded them just for something that seemed realistic. And then I went ahead and traded back one spot with the Colts just to pick up an extra second. Now, I don't know if they'd be willing to give up a second in that scenario. Maybe it's more likely a third round pick instead of their second. I'm not sure. But I went ahead and did the second. So I took Will Anderson. I am biased Alabama fan, so I would love to have him on the Cardinals. If we traded down, that would be fine too. But if he's there, I want him personally. So now that we have 2 second-round picks, given ours and Indy's, I went ahead and got a right tackle, which DeJuan Jones, he is an absolute mammoth of a man. He is 6'8", 375 pounds. He is a natural right tackle versus us getting a left tackle and trying to force to play the right tackle position. So that is already a plus for him. I believe having him sit behind Beachum for a year or two, Beachum can show him the ropes, teach him how to be a pro's pro, that kind of thing. The strengths, he's a very good run blocker on runs to his side specifically, which I think will go great in Petzing's, zone running type system. He does have a few, cons. Obviously, when you're that big, you are a little bit slower, unfortunately. But I think he would be a great pick. With our second round pick, I went ahead and got Mazai Smith for our defensive interior. So now we got our edge and we got our interior. He is 6'3", 323 pounds, and he has a rare combination of size and athleticism. So according at the combine, he had the third best defensive tackle athleticism score, and they're comping him right now to Dontari Poe, who has been a multiple Pro Bowler, all pro seasons. He's been very solid. I mean, he's not elite, not the best of the best, but if you got a Dontari Poe type player in the second round, you cannot complain with that. His cons right now is consistency, making plays behind the line of scrimmage, but under the guidance of Gannon and Rallis, who did wonders with the Eagles line, I wonder if, they could kind of show him a couple techniques, develop him a little bit more to make plays like that. In the third round, I went with Luke Weipler. Obviously, we need a center. I know we picked up Froholt. Yes. Yeah. So he
said that 10 times fast.
Could not have. could not. So I wonder if maybe we get Weipler there and Froholt can kind of show him some pointers here and there. His combine production, so out of all centers, he was ranked the third best production-wise of all centers coming out this year. He was the number one athleticism center, which I think in our scheme would help. If you're able to reach the second level in his own running system, that helps a lot. And his pros were he's a great communicator. He's great at climbing to the linebackers at second level and pulling. So all three of those are great to see. You want your center to be a good communicator. I feel like we've struggled the past few years whenever Rodney Hudson hasn't been in. I feel like we've lost that communication aspect of our center. And then his cons are he does lack his arm size. He has short arms. So that can be a knock. But, I mean, with proper technique and speed, which he does have to make up for that, positioning can overcome the shortness of arms. So with our third round pick, I went for wide receiver A.T. Perry. He is 6'3", 200. He ran a 4.47, which is excellent for a 40 time for a guy of that size. He had a 35-inch vert, which is also very impressive for a guy that size. Typically, the taller and heavier you are, the shorter your vert is. But with him being 6'3", a 35-inch vert, that's a very high catch radius. Let's see. So he's impressive for his size. He's good. He's very good at beating man coverage. He struggles a little bit in off coverage. That's what the knocks on him have been. And he's also struggled with drops and blocking in his college career, which both of those can be taught. You know, you can overcome drops and you can be taught better technique. Coming from Wake Forest, he may not have even been asked to block very much. I'm not familiar with their scheme, but I know you can teach that and it can be taught with a guy that frame. That's just a big body to get out in space, you know. For our fourth round pick, or actually, my bad, our third round pick, I went Travius Hodgins-Tomlinson, which he is LaDainian Tomlinson's nephew, I believe.
Yep.
And so his major red flag or major con is his size. He's only 5'8", 180, which is super small, but he ran a 4'4", 140, which is really fast. He had a 39-inch vert, which is elite, and he is projected to be the number one nickel/corner. And in his college career, he only allowed 34.6% completion percentage when targeted in coverage, which is elite. That's about as good as you can ask for. And he had 41 pass breakups in his whole college career, and he had 18 in 2022 alone. So, his con is his size, but he makes up for that with speed, athleticism, and he appears to be very knowledgeable about how to leverage certain routes. He's getting a lot of pass breakups to be so small. So I think if you had if you had Marco on the outside, put Travius on the inside, and then now with my next pick in the fourth round, you get Jacorian Bennett, which this probably was a little bit of a stretch. This was my most stretch of a pick here, but I felt like with Marco on the outside, we have Travius on the inside, and he's small. He needed another taller cornerback, so I went with Jacorian Bennett, who's 5'11", 190, which is better height, better size for a cornerback. His athleticism score was in the 96th percentile. He was the third best athletic cornerback in this year's combine. He ran a 4.3 40 and had a 40.5-inch vert, which for a 5'11", 190 corner, a 4.3 is rather quick. That's very fast. His pros are he has great size. He had 27 pass breakups over the last 2 years. He tackles very well in space and stops the run. His cons are he's been both inconsistent in coverages and he has balance issues in coverages. Well, you know who is great at teaching DBs? That would be our new head coach.
Right.
So he's sort of a DB guru or whisperer. So I think giving this guy's size, which you can't teach, and his cons being stuff that you can teach, I think if Gannon got a hold of him, he could teach them a lot. For our round 5, Chandler Zavala, I know it's a guy you're a huge fan of.
Yeah.
He's 6'5", 325. His pros are good leverage, good power, good feet. So all three things you look for. He does struggle to stay engaged with blocks at times, but if you're getting a guy in the 5th round with that size, you can't really complain. And especially now that we've brought back Will Hernandez and everything, got to learn behind. Our next 5th round pick, I went with DeWayne McBride. I feel like that's the best way to go and attack the running back position. Signing a running back in free agency rarely ever works. Most of the time you overpay. So getting our 3rd running back, I would assume, in the draft this year. DeWayne McBride is 5'10", 210 pounds. He was very productive in college, UAB, right down the road from me. Mm-hmm. Saw him many times in person. He had 120 yards in 10 of his 11 games. He's very comfortable running behind various running schemes. They ran 2 separate ones. He had great vision. He's a good off-tackle runner, which is what Petzing likes. The cons are, I don't know if this is a knock on him or just the scheme, but he had almost no pass catches like his entire college career. I'm not sure if that was because he can't do it or the scheme just didn't do that. I'm not sure. But that would be something to take into account. And he does fumble every now and then, but once again, that can be something that's taught. But he is insane. He's great. I've seen him multiple times. He's going to be a good pro.
Nice.
this round 6 pick, now knowing the Zach Pascal news probably would have went different here. But I did get Bryce Ford-Wheaton. I picked him because he is 6'4", 221, and ran a 4.38.
Oh, wow.
Which is insane for that size of a guy. He had a 41-inch vert, so he's an athletic freak. He was the number 1 athleticism graded receiver. His knock is he didn't really have a ton of college production. He only had 3 100-yard games total in his entire college career, which isn't great, but he has good physicality, he has good contested catch, and he's a good blocker. All 3 of those things are what we're looking for in this new scheme. And provided our shortness at receiver, we just need big bodies in here that can make plays, that can block, because coming from a pass-heavy scheme to more of a zone running, or what we assume will be a zone running scheme, you need bigger bodies on the field that can just get in the way. And then with the last pick, I went Stetson Bennett, but I said you could pretty much sub in any late-round quarterback here. Clayton Tune, the UCLA quarterback, Stetson Bennett, pretty much anyone that could just sub in his depth, which now we brought David Blau back, so that may or may not even matter anymore. But
nice. So let me share a few thoughts. I like a lot of the players on here. I think this is a really good mock, and let's get some of the comments too. Classy Nasty likes this, so nice. He says nice. Grandizer, but there's no John Michael Schmitz, so what's up with that, right?
I tried.
Yeah,
I tried.
I hear you. Eduardo Bonito says really solid draft. The perfect trade down with Colts, getting Will Anderson number 4 and then another round 2 pick. Yeah, love that move. If we can make it happen to get extra draft capital and still get Will Anderson, that is the chef's kiss move, right? Agent 47, he says, I like Jones, but between him and Wright, I go Wright. I'm guessing Wright was probably off the board you went. Grandizer loves A.T. Perry, point for A.T. Perry, which I love him too, right? Anyone who watches this knows I love him as a guy we could get. I think he's going to go on day 2, somewhere around 2 or 3, but I would love to get A.T. Perry. Andrew Vinny says great mock. Grandizer says super draft, however, -1 from John Michael Schmitz, right? Agent 47 says good mock overall. You addressed all the holes, right? I love the scenario of trading back and still getting Will Anderson. You mentioned, thinking, well, man, we might not even get a second because of just a 1 spot move back. But I actually think you might even actually get more than what you did. And I know it's only a 1 spot move back, but you've got an interesting situation here where it's under normal circumstances, the whole trade value chart really matters, really gives a good guide of how those picks end up getting traded. But in a scenario like this, the conversation between Monty Austin-Fort and Chris Ballard of the Colts is essentially this. If you don't trade up to number 3, someone behind you is moving up ahead of you, right? Atlanta, Tennessee, Las Vegas, may be not as interested now with Jimmy G, but what you tell them is, hey, if you don't move up, someone else is. So like they can't lowball you as easily, if that makes sense. So I actually think you're getting a second round pick and maybe a future day 2 pick, or maybe another pick like, in the 4th or 5th round. So I think you'd actually get more than just that second round pick. But I really like that. Now, the whole thing about, I profiled DeJuan Jones, maybe a month back or so. And I thought his PFF profile was intriguing because it talked about if you have a running quarterback, this is the guy you want. He's big, powerful, a right tackle, that we need a right tackle in the future. Beacham, they brought him back, but he's still, 34 years old, I think.
Yes.
When I did the video recently, when I talked about the kind of offensive lineman the Cardinals would want, and I learned more about it myself preparing, researching for that video, DeJuan Jones, I think, could function in this offense, and same with Wright, but I think they're not ideal fits for a wide zone. They can make it, they can play in that, and they can be good in it, but guys like Matthew Bergeron are a better fit, I think, for a wide zone. And I think when you look at an early second round pick, that's a premium pick. And if they're going to take a tackle there, which they might, I feel like they're going to want to take someone who isn't a bad fit, even if he's a good player, if that makes sense, or they're going to go with someone who's a better fit. And I think re-signing Beachum means they're more likely to wait till day 3 and get someone like Carter Warren or Warren McClendon, one of those other tackles that might go later. So for me, like I haven't been drafting Jones or Wright, even though I love them as prospects, and I think they would be good. I just don't know that they're going to allocate a second round pick for a player, even as good as they are, who aren't ideal fits. So that's just me. But I know listen, you're going to see a lot of our mock drafts have DeJuan Jones. He's very popular and for good reason. He's a good player. For me, I've moved away from that. Right. But love Mazzy Smith. I love him. A nose tackle has a little bit of juice, though. I think you see him in a lot of my mock drafts. Love it. Whippler, we love him, right? Love Perry. I love Hodges Tomlinson as that slot cornerback with Byron Murphy moving on. We need a slot cornerback and an outside cornerback, right? Marco Wilson can be one of our outsides. We're going to need to draft or sign a cornerback to play on the outside, and we're going to need to draft or sign a slot. So I love the back-to-back cornerbacks. Got Bennett, who's more the outside guy, probably. Hodges Tomlinson, your slot corner. Everyone knows I love Chandler Zavala. Brett Coleman loves him, and he's really talked him up a lot. McBride, you've seen him. I love getting day 3 running backs, right? So I think that's great. Ford Wheaton, I don't know much about the West Virginia offense, but I'm guessing it wasn't a prolific offense. So a lot of times when you have a guy who didn't put up great production, sometimes it's as much to do with the offense, so if he's got the tools, you work with him, right? So, and then quarterbacks, I don't hate going quarterback on day 3, with the situation. For me, I like the guy, Dorian Thompson or Robinson Thomas and Thompson Robinson. I'm sorry, DTR, right? I like him or the guy from BYU, Jaron Hall. I think those are guys I like late as a fit for the system, but anyone there late, I don't mind, right? So that's kind of my feedback, but I think it's a really good mock, and I think people in the chat like it too. Let's get to some of the other comments. Let's see. She got a couple folks who jumped in. Red Sea finally out of work. Appreciate you being here, Corey. Agent 47, if Cardinals will draft some quarterback on this draft, I think Bennett is the best option, even with problems off field. He's old and experienced in big games. I mean, he does have a high floor, and for a backup, you like that. So, that I don't hate Bennett as an option. I just think there's other guys I like a little bit better, but yeah, that makes sense. Chris Smith loves A.T. Perry, right? Yeah, he's a favorite here in TCR land. GGT, great draft. He likes it too. Jordan P just made it. Thanks for being here, Jordan. Appreciate you. Chris is saying, what do you think about trading back with Detroit? I did a mock trading 3rd and Hopkins to Lions for their 6th, 18th, and Jeff Okudah. I love the idea of trading back with the Lions at number 6. I think it's an interesting approach you did where you get Hopkins in there, because I don't think the mock draft simulator will let you trade back to 6 and ask for 6 and 18 and you'll get it. But I don't think the Lions are going to give up both of those picks. As far as Jeff Okudah goes, maybe they would give him up in the trade. I know I think he had a rough start of his career. I think he's a little bit better lately. He's a guy who's getting ready to get to a second contract. So that's an interesting guy. They might want to move off from him rather than pay him. So it's intriguing. But so like I said, the mock drafts will let you get 6 and 18. I don't think they're going to give those up, but with Hopkins in the trade, maybe that's an interesting way to solve our 2 problems, that we're not getting the kind of trade offers that I'm assuming we're not getting the kind of offers that Austin Fort would like, and that's why he hasn't been traded. So maybe grouping him, packaging him, that's interesting. So I don't hate that. I definitely, if Detroit wants to move up for a quarterback, I think they're an interesting target. There's part of me that thinks so. They want to roll with Goff, and I know people are down on Goff. I think I've said this before, but there's just something that makes me think like they like Goff because people have sort of ridden him off. And I feel like there's part of them that likes a guy who's going to buy into what they're doing, is a little bit of an underdog, and that they want he's going to be their guy. Now maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they draft a quarterback and he really is a bridge for them. But I don't hate that at all. I think you make an interesting, kind of proposal of a trade there. And if that were available, if we could trade the third Hopkins for Lions for those 2 picks in Okudah, I would do it. Yeah. Because as you talked about, Hopkins, you say, a third and a fifth. And as much as I thought he would get a late first and early second because the free agent market in receivers is not great, it does seem like they haven't been getting that offer. Now we're starting to wonder if it's going to be a second. A lot of people think it won't be. So yeah, maybe you do that there, right? So I think that's an interesting question, Chris. Deontay Singleton mentioning Christian Matthew. Yeah, Matthew's a guy who's an outside cornerback. I'm intrigued with what we'll see from him. I just don't want to go into the season with him as a starter. I don't think, that's me, but I like his tools, like physically. I've talked about this before. If you look at his player profile in terms of just the physical measurables, like his combine stuff, the guy he compares with is Richard Sherman. Now, Richard Sherman has a lot of other things in terms of his IQ and the way he plays that made him Richard Sherman. So I'm not saying Christian Matthew is Richard Sherman, but he clearly has NFL level physical traits that are comparable to someone like Richard Sherman. So I would like to see what's going to happen with him. I just don't, to me, I want him to be a guy who's a depth guy for now, right? Ryan Lindsay, thanks for being here. How do I submit my draft? So Grandizer, I think, mentioned this, right? So it's in the check out what Grandizer said there, and there's also in the description of the video, I include that there. The short answer is send it to me on Twitter, tag me with it on Twitter, or share it in the Discord. Austin Hoy saying Bryce Ford Wheaton seems like a nice late round pick with that kind of athleticism. I agree. Dakota Bedard, knock, who's there? Thanks for being here. Jordan likes that deal that you proposed with Chris, the deal for Detroit, I think. Let's see. We've got Mizaki Felix. Thanks for being here. Would address cornerback much earlier. Yeah, I think if I'm probably going a little earlier for my outside cornerback as well. But in this scenario, they're probably signing a free agent, right? Is probably what we're looking at, right? Pete Treepack saying this is easily my favorite mock I've seen on here. So there you go, Aaron. You've got someone who's a big fan of this, right? Andrew Bradford says that's a great draft. So getting some good reviews there. Agent 47, but if you put Richardson learning with Goff, that's really good for them. I agree. I think that would also be good. I just wonder if they want to run with Goff. Goff is durable, but it wouldn't shock me if they traded for a quarterback like that as well. Like that would be a good place for him to learn behind. Petrie Pack would love if we could get us 2 from the Colts and still get Anderson Jr. would be best of both worlds, early pick, home run player. Jordan P saying Mazzy Smith is interesting since he has a foul. I think it's a misdemeanor. I could be wrong. I believe it was a misdemeanor. Do you know anything about that?
I looked it up, and he applied for his gun permit and was waiting on it to come in, and then got pulled over at like a traffic stop, and so it was deemed an unregistered gun.
Okay.
But I don't know if it was going down as a felony or misdemeanor, but he's not facing any criminal charges or anything like that.
Yeah, and Jordan P saying, wondering how much that would weigh and where a team takes him. I mean, I think that's the kind of thing that if there's more to it, like there's more to it than that, maybe. But if it's an isolated incident, it's a little bit of a technicality, and he wasn't doing anything crazy, irresponsible. I think teams will ask him about it. But I don't think it's going to take him off many people's boards unless there's something more.
Yeah, he didn't have his concealed carry permit, is what it
was. Right. So, Decimus, thanks for being here. Do you think we might be in on Rock Ya-Sin? I think that's a definite possibility. Drafted by the Colts, right? This coaching staff, that's where they kind of all started together, right? That's where all the guys they're bringing in. I shouldn't say a lot of them they're bringing in had coached together on the Colts, on the staff, or the Vikings, right? And some of them both. I think that's a great possibility. They're going to be in on someone at cornerback, I think. And I think that's a very good likelihood. I mean, we'll see, but I think that's a name that makes a lot of sense, right? Looks like you think that too,
yeah.
Right?
That's what I was hoping for in this draft, is we'd sign someone like Yasin and then have the two rookies come in, learn up under him and Marco.
Yeah, Jordan P says, yep, sign Yasin and draft 2 corners. I want to, and I'll get to the rest of the comments in the chat. I want to comment on this real quickly, because if you didn't watch the interview with Eric Eager, and if you're here tonight, you should definitely watch that, because he talks about some really interesting stuff with roster building. And one of the things I asked him about was a paper he wrote called "The Weak Link Nature of Football." And if you're not familiar with this concept, it's really interesting. But it talks about, like, the idea is there's certain position groups, there's certain things where the most important thing is not how good is your best player, but how good is your worst player. Like, if you think about coverage, right? You're covering, like your cornerbacks and your safeties and maybe your linebackers to some degree. If there's a weak link there that is really deficient, the offense is going to attack that and pick it apart. But if your worst player in coverage is average-ish or better, doesn't even have to be great, right? But if your worst coverage player is decent, they can all be just kind of decent to good. You don't need an elite cornerback if your coverage, your safeties, and all your cornerbacks that are on the field are solid, right? Yeah, Jordan's saying, right? It's only as good as your weakest link. So, like, when people are talking about wanting to pay a lot of money for top cornerbacks, I'm always like, I'd rather, instead of paying $12 million, $15 million for the best cornerback, get me Rock Ya-Sin, draft a guy, maybe sign another free agent if you really want to, but make sure you have 4 or 5 good cornerbacks, and make sure none of them are a total weak link, right? And so that's why someone like Rock Ya-Sin is interesting to me, because he's kind of that kind of player. Randy Morrison saying, can offset a weak link with good coaching, but it doesn't always work, right? Like, listen, I know Vance Joseph, people were up and down with him, right? Or hot and cold with him. But I think he actually did a pretty good job of covering for a lot of weaknesses, but you can only do that so much. So anyway, like, I'm really, into like going with just good across the board cornerbacks. Agent 47 said, I prefer overpaid a great offensive line or defense line. I will say offensive line is another weak link thing, where you're better off having 5 solid guys as opposed to 1 stud and a couple average and a bad offensive lineman. That's why I love the Will Hernandez signing. It wasn't too expensive. He's solid. Get me 5 guys that are somewhere a standard deviation away from Will Hernandez, on offensive line. But, there's other positions where it's a little more of a strong link. So anyway, I know it's a little bit diatribe, but it's like, I like attacking cornerback with multiple players instead of one really expensive player. Red Sea saying, real quick, 48 people in here, only 13 likes. That's unacceptable. Smash that like button. I imagine some of that's because you haven't refreshed, but yes, please, if you haven't hit that like button, please do. I appreciate that. Tio Capero, thanks for being here. That's crazy. I didn't even know about that. Probably talking about Mazi Smith, right? Let's see. Jordan P saying front 4 dictates what you can do on the back end anyway. Invest heavily in the front 4 and get a solid DB group, right? Yeah. Mazaki Felix saying, not an Anderson fan, trade back, grabs Gonzalez in the first, address edge in second, third. I don't hate that. All right. There's my now I'm going to talk about my mock draft. And Aaron, I'm going to give you a chance to rip it apart afterwards.
All right.
So here's what I did. I did a couple trade backs, right? I traded back with the Lions, and then I traded back again with the Titans, right? I always try to make sure the mock draft I do includes a player I profiled, right? So obviously Lucas Van Ness, I got him at number 11. I also did a Hopkins trade. I traded him with the Jaguars. I know they've got some nice receivers there, but that's an interesting, that's a team with a quarterback and a rookie contract trying to taste the playoffs. Wonder if they would be trying to upgrade their weapons. Clemson quarterback, Clemson receiver. Jacksonville isn't too terribly far from home for Hopkins, so I think there's some interesting reasons. So anyway, I did a trade there, 3rd round and a 6th round pick. So at 11, I went Lucas Van Ness, right? The guy I wanted to profile. Then Mazi Smith, like you, love him as kind of that nose. Then the 2nd round, I really shore up the defensive line with another guy I profiled recently who I absolutely love as a prospect. Added Tuima Adebawore, got another versatile guy who can play kind of inside and out. So with those three guys, I feel like we've really got a nice core for that defensive line, right, across the board. Then I also went with Luke Whippler. Went cornerback in the third round. Garrett Williams is a guy who I think is interesting. You look at his profile, they talk about his ability to mirror in man coverage is really good. Maybe he's got some things to work on, but he's got some elite traits. You know, you talked about how Gannon is a guy who can develop cornerbacks. So I got him. I thought that was really good value in the third round, getting a guy who I think is a starting caliber outside cornerback. And then obviously I went with A.T. Perry, love him in the third round. Then I got a running back late in the third round, Kendre Miller, guy at TCU who I really like. Then I went with another TCU prospect who you went with as well, right? Hodges Tomlinson. So, I've got my outside cornerback in Williams and then my slot corner in Hodges Tomlinson like you did. Then I went Chandler Zavala. I mean, he's got to be in all my drafts. My favorite guard prospect, right? Especially later, right? Kobe Turner, a little more depth on the interior defensive line. Got a depth at safety with Quindell Johnson out of Memphis. And then guard Caleb Chandler, a developmental guard who I profiled in my offensive line video, who I think is a good fit for the wide zone offense. So I've got a guy to develop there a little bit. So, hit, the defensive line, hit the offensive line, receiver, running back, cornerbacks, all the positions we talked about. I didn't go quarterback. I haven't been doing that in my mocks, but anyway, this is what I went with. Let me get the comments from the chat and then I'll let you jump in there and talk about what you think. CB likes us, a solid draft. Agent 47 loves the trades, right? And what I didn't talk about a lot is there's a future first round pick in there, and I think a future fourth round pick, and there are a couple of future picks in there as well. Jordan P loves Adebawore, right? I think he's really great. Red C's not sold on Van Ness. That's fair. You like the guys a little more fully developed. I don't mind the guys that have the tools, the guys that need development. Brian, no punter. He's got the punters and kickers in his mocks. He's carrying the torch for making sure you get punters and kickers in your draft. So he's disappointed there's no punter, but all right. Let's see. And then, Agent 47 loved a future first. Same here. All right, Aaron, what are your thoughts? Rip it apart for me.
All right. So on the two trades, I don't mind those at all. I love picking up the extra first and extra fourth for next year, especially with at least how long of a road it looks like we're facing. I mean, could be a crazy turnaround, but that's not what I'm projecting. So love picking up the extra picks there. Lucas Van Ness, like you said, in your deep dive today, he could be a good developmental prospect if he does become what Justin Smith does or was, and that's the kind of player he profiles into. That's a steal at 11 plus all the extras you picked up. Mizai Smith, of course, we both love him. Adebawore, I also really like in my mocks. In the mocks where I do trade back and don't take Will Anderson, I always pick him in the second round as well. I really like him. Luke Whippler, same. Garrett Williams actually is who I was targeting in my mock, but the pick I used on A.T. Perry, he was already gone. That's why I didn't, and that's why I had to go the two later corners. But Garrett Williams was the one I was actually targeting there. A.T. Perry, obviously we both like him. I also think the Jags are a sneaky play for DeAndre Hopkins as well. I know they've talked about him pretty much since he became available. Whether they actually move on that, I don't know. But a third and a sixth, like I said in my mock, I think that's probably closer to the value we're actually going to see and not a first or second like a lot of people are wanting. Kendre Miller, I didn't watch much of TCU this year outside of their championship game and then the two playoff games. But any third round or later running back typically is pretty good value there. Get him for 4 years, don't pay him a lot, and then let him go. Travius Hodges Tomlinson, just like mine, great slot corner, has all the physical traits, small but good in coverage. Chandler Zavala, like mine, great guard in the fifth round. Then round sixth, not familiar with Kobe Turner, but any trench protection that you can pick up late is always good. You can never have too much depth along the offensive and defensive line, especially with us being starved on both of those groups. Quindell Johnson, I like picking up a safety because, I mean, Buddha and Jalen are elite, but especially Buddha, with how hard he plays, he does get nicked up a lot. And you never know what kind of subset packages they're going to run on defense this year, and it's always good to have quality depth behind them. And then another guard, can't go wrong with O-line depth.
Yeah. Real quick, Jason Trull with the super chat. Thank you so much. Hey, Joe, nice to see you again. Great content. Appreciate you and your generous support and your kind words, Jason. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Ryan, isn't Van Ness just a straight power rusher? I still like him though. Yeah, right now that's kind of what he is. He doesn't have a diverse repertoire. He needs to work on that, but he has the physical tools to develop that, right? So he's a little bit of a project, but he's still athletic enough that I think you could play him sooner rather than later. But to reach his ceiling, he needs to develop some things. Absolutely. Mizaki Felix saying Williams coming off, and I think you probably meant ACL maybe injury. So I didn't know that. That's good to know. So I'd be interested to see where he is in his recovery from that for sure. So, all right. Well, yeah, I'll tell you, in general, kind of also part of the way I look at this, I think the Cardinals are going to draft 1 to 2 cornerbacks, and they may not take the guys we take, but they have an idea of the guys they like, and whoever they take, I'm going to feel pretty good about it. I think as long as they don't wait till like round 6 or 7 to start doing that. If they take a different guy in the 2nd or 3rd round than what I've identified in a different slot corner, I'm going to trust that Jonathan Gannon has an idea of what he's looking for. He knows better than I do what he wants in a quarterback. So whoever he takes is, I think, going to be a good fit, and I'm excited to see. And I kind of feel the same way about offensive line and Monty Austinfort, because with the Patriots, they did such a good job of picking offensive linemen. So anyway, all right. Well, thanks for all the comments. Man, so Aaron, we're gonna let you do, kind of tell people about what you do at the Fantasy Bros, where they can follow you. I've got your links in the description of the video, but we're going to give you a chance to say, whatever shout outs you want before you get out of here. And then I start talking about, go down the next hour and a half of your mock drafts. So Aaron, tell everyone where they can find you, what kind of content they can expect, and if you've got anything coming down the pipeline.
All right. So you can find me at the Fantasy Bros on YouTube. It's me and my brother. We are a fantasy football podcast. Not a lot of off-season stuff, as there's not a lot really to talk about. When drafts start coming, we are going to start publishing more videos once we actually know where players are going and what teams they're on, that kind of stuff. So that should be coming soon. But really, during the season, we do produce at least 3 or 4 videos a week with content, answer questions, Q&As. So if you like that kind of stuff, feel free to follow us. And if you like Twitter and are active on Twitter, I do have a Twitter at the Trolley Bully, which I can comment on the YouTube video. It's the same as that. Talk a lot of Cardinals on there. So if you always want to talk Cardinals, I'm always down for that. But that's all I got. Thank you, Joe, for allowing me to come on your show.
Yeah, it was great having you. I love, this is one, I always talk about this, but this is one of the things I love about doing this is I get to meet other Cardinals fans and other content creators that even if they're fans of other teams. And this for me is just a blast to get to meet people and hear other perspectives and get to know other fans. So I appreciate you hanging out with us. We'll have you again here next year's mock draft. We're getting, next mock draft Monday, next offseason, we'll get you in the rotation then again.
Perfect.
But definitely appreciate you jumping on here with us. So we're going to let you get out of here. Everyone, again, check out his links in the description below. Make sure you follow him on all the socials and YouTube. Aaron, thank you. We'll see you later, my friend.
See ya.
All right. Jason with another super chat. Thank you so much. So Jason is saying, I'd rather trade back to acquire more picks. This new regime has a tall task to clean up Keim's mess. Let's be real. I trust the process of this. Yeah, Jason, I completely agree. I know not everyone feels that way. And hey, listen, everyone has the right to, have their whatever opinion they want. That's part of being a fan. I am of that mind as well. In fact, again, I refer back to the interview I did with Eric Eager of Sumer Sports, and I asked him, what's the most prudent thing the Cardinals can and should do with the 3rd overall pick? And his response, to paraphrase, was that the data unequivocally say that if you don't need a quarterback, you should trade back and get that extra draft capital. I know Will Anderson's a great player, but some of it has to do with some of the weak link things we talk about there. And a lot of it has to do with, that, listen, Anderson's a great player, but there are some other players in this draft who are going to be great players, and you want more shots at that, right? And, so if you just look at how many players end up being elite players drafted, late in the first round, in the second round, it's hit or miss sometimes, but like if you get multiple picks, you have a better chance. And even if they don't become elite, if you can take that number 3 overall pick, trade it, and get like 4 or 5 other picks, right? Out of that, depending on how far you trade. Maybe you get 3 or 4 picks. But if you leverage that into like 3 starters to 3 to 4 starters, if you nail it, right? To me, I'd rather have a roster that's good across the board than like, having 1 or 2 elite players and not as much depth. So I'm of that mind as well. I know not everyone feels that way, and that's cool. We all have our listen, that you get to be a fan the way you want to be, as long as you treat people with respect. So I'm not, but I am with you, Jason, 100%. Some other comments in here. Let's see. We've got Brian saying, if Anderson and Aiden Hutchinson were both in the same draft, who would be getting drafted first? That's a good question. In my opinion, I think it would be Will Anderson. I think Aiden Hutchinson's a really good player, but I just feel like that year there was, when he was drafted, I guess last year, right? They felt like there were a lot of intriguing edge rushers, but no one who was a clear cut the edge rusher of the draft class. Some people liked him, some people like Thibodeau. So obviously Walker, got drafted first. And I think Anderson is a guy who's a clear cut above. So I think it would be Anderson. But that's my thoughts. Maybe people have different opinions. Agent 47 thinks Anderson, right? Let's see. Decimus saying, I read somewhere that on a rebuild retool, it's best to build your depth first. Let's hope some are way better. Yeah, I think, and I talked about this earlier, I think the thing you want to do is you want to focus on getting using the draft to get premium positions. And then once you've got that, then you start plugging holes with free agency and additional drafts, right? Alone at last, Joseph Kamel, right? Yeah. So this is the point where we are alone at last to talk mock drafts, right? Randy Morrison's agreeing with Decimus, saying build a solid cake, then add the fancy frosting. Yeah. So, and it depends what we mean by, I guess, I think it is better, to build. If you're saying depth, I think build just a solid foundation and then upgrade from there, right? Build on that and upgrade. And that, I would generally agree with that. Yeah. Let's see. Ryan Lindsay has got a comment. Personally, I think there's no reason not to try and trade down, even if we miss out on Will Anderson. Yeah, I mean, I'm on that, right? Looks like Mizaki Felix, I'm also on team trade back and collect picks, right? Yeah, that's where I'm at. So, again, I understand why people want to stay and take Will Anderson. I think the data, I'm a believer that in analytics, I think you have to use them in context, but I do think that the data show that, right, unequivocally, right? Randy's saying that's what I mean. So yeah, about the building, the depth. Okay, so let's get into the mock draft. So that's what y'all are really here for, right? You want to see your mock drafts up on the board. So let's get into it. First one is from Chris Young. I don't think I've seen Chris in the chat, but if you're here, say hey. So Chris Young did 2 trade backs, right? Traded back first with the Falcons and then did another trade back to get the Lions' second pick in the first round, number 18. And in doing so, got a future first, a future fifth, and then another future first, and and multiple picks. So a lot of draft capital this year and next, right? And then took Kalijah Kancey, a player I really like, kind of later in the first round there. So, that getting that interior pass rush, that guy's kind of, really freaky athleticism. He's an interesting prospect. He's a little bit smaller, but his athleticism and his movement is off the, jumping off or his get off from the line of scrimmage is really, really good. And then we got Steve Avila, who's here listed as a guard. He played center as well. He could be a guard or a center. So helping with the interior offensive line, getting Eli Ricks, a cornerback in round 3 out of Alabama, a player I like. If you're waiting to get a cornerback in round 3, I think he's a really guy who has got great tools. I think there's a little bit of injury concern with him is maybe why he fell a bit. But getting a nice cornerback there. Then Luke Whippler, obviously we've seen him in all the drafts so far tonight. Moro Jomo, another defensive interior lineman. Then a developmental edge in Isaiah McGuire out of Missouri. Halfback Dwayne McBride, who Aaron had in his draft. Linebacker Cam Jones, so getting a little bit extra depth at linebacker. Quarterback Stetson Bennett and Keaton Thompson, receiver out of Virginia, who I think is, if I remember, is guy who does kind of a Swiss Army knife kind of a guy, right? So I think that's what you got there. Robert's asking, would you consider that Falcons trade back realistic for the picks he got in return? That's a good question. So first, the trading back from 3 to 8, getting a third, a fourth, and a future first and a fifth. I tell you, I mean, in terms of, I don't think it's unrealistic in terms of getting that you got too much, because I'm actually a little surprised you didn't get a second round pick. But if you're not getting a second round pick, maybe you need a third and a fourth. So I don't think it's completely out of whack. They might, if it's the line or the Falcons, they might prefer to give a second and then a later rather than the third and fourth, but maybe not. I don't know. I don't think it's completely out of whack. Maybe it's a little bit much, but there's the quarterback tax there. So, I don't think it's that unrealistic. Agent 47, I don't see why Lions trade up to 8, maybe for Levis. Yeah, I think if we're gaming it out, why would that happen in real life? It would have to be because one of the quarterbacks fell to 8, and and they're like, oh wow, well I guess we'll do that, right? So that would be why, right? That would make sense, right? If Levis fell, right? I think he's, of the 3 quarterbacks, I feel like Levis is the one that's most likely to slide. I know Richardson wasn't, he was considered the 4th quarterback before the combine, but I think what he did there might push him up there. So yeah, I CB saying no undersigned receiver, Josh Downs. What's wrong with this, right? And Robert thinks the Lion trade back is a little suspect, right? So maybe, yeah. So, but I like getting the draft capital. I like Cansey, right? Or the trade up by the Lions is a little suspect. Yeah. There'd have to be a quarterback there, I would think. But like Avila, really good player. Hicks or Ricks. Yeah. I mean, you want receiver late, but the fact that they signed a receiver, they might not be now as eager to go earlier. So got a halfback. Yeah, I like it. I think you did a good job with the players you picked. You definitely leaned more into getting some future draft capital, but I like it, Chris. Next up, Greedy Green. Greedy Green did a trade back with the Seahawks, which it trades within the division are a little unusual, so maybe that wouldn't be realistic. But you traded back, got a lot. That might be a bit much for just a couple spots. I don't know, but nonetheless, did a trade back and then traded back with the Eagles. So they're moving up, probably getting an elite defensive player, right? I'm not, with all the players the Eagles have lost in free agency, I don't know if they're going to be trading up. They might look to kind of replenish, but who knows? But yeah, it's mock draft money, so we're gonna have fun. So anyway, trade back a couple times. Got Tyree Wilson. I know that right now Red Sea is excited about that pick. It's his favorite prospect in this entire draft, right, Corey? So Tyree Wilson at 10, which I don't hate that. We've talked about this before. If you trade back and get Wilson, he's a guy who, like Van Ness, is a little bit of a project, but he has the tools. So I don't hate doing that. And then you got Bijan Robinson at 20. I think folks know I'm not a fan of going running back in the first round, but if you're going to do it. I don't hate doing it late. And if it's a guy like Bijan Robinson, I'm not personally doing that, but I understand it. the talent's there. And, you've got multiple first round picks, so you're doing that way. Emmanuel Forbes, pick 30, so you got a cornerback, a ball hawk, right? A guy you want to see add a little bit of size, right? But he's a guy who's definitely, got some great ball traits, right? In terms of, going after the ball and getting interceptions. And then, of course, for the first time of the night,
it's got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
Everyone, we've got the JMS song. So John Michael Schmitz, the first mock of the night with JMS. That's a winner just for that. Agent 47 saying Pete Carroll loves so much Richardson to do that, or so you're saying that he loves Richardson so much that he might do that. So maybe, right? He might, yeah. Red Sea gonna jump out my own window out of excitement, right? Dakota Bedard saying breaking news, we got a player receiver. Yeah, we talked about it earlier. Yep. Got Zach Pascal, the receiver. So okay. And then we've got another trade to kind of get some extra picks, right? Your son is watching and happy. Awesome. Well, we'll do the full JMS song at some point, right? That's the weekly thing. We play the full thing for your son at some point, right? Eli Ricks, we talked about him last mock draft. So getting another cornerback. So you've doubled up on cornerbacks, which we might need, with losing Byron Murphy. So like that. Moro Ojomo, like him, getting some interior defensive line help. Dorian Williams getting a linebacker, some guy, a little more depth there. A guy who might become, maybe a guy you draft to become the third linebacker when Kaiser White's contract is up. Jack Roy, another defensive interior line help. You've got reunited Robinson and Johnson, the two running backs. So the running mates are now going to be part of the Cardinals. So that's interesting, right? That is spicy, right? Spicy time, right? And then we've got Jalen Moreno Cropper out of Fresno State, a receiver. I don't know a lot about him. I need to do a little more research on him. Now another receiver, Xavier Hutchinson, who I think has got some really nice traits. You got a couple prospect receivers, another trade back, and then Charlie Jones out of Purdue. So you got 3 receivers on day 3. So really building some developmental guys there. I probably don't have room on the roster for all 3 of them, but there we go. Chandler Zavala, love that. Antonio Mafi, great player. So you did some interesting things here. I mean, there's some of the things here that I would do a little bit differently, but there's some players, I really like on here. Obviously JMS. I like Wilson where you got him. I like Ricks. Love Rashawn Johnson. Robinson's a great player. Again, I'm just not going running back that early. Obviously Chandler Zavala. So there's some nice things on here, right? So I like that. Let's see. Jake and Snakey saying Hutchinson was really good at Indiana or Iowa State University. Yeah, I need to check out a little bit more about him. The receiver, right? Yeah, reuniting the running backs, the Texas backs is interesting. Robert's son is watching and happy. Awesome. Well, we're all about making the kids and the fans happy, of the Cardinals fans happy. So glad to do that. Agent 47 is more ideal having future picks than in the same draft year because someday we'll need to re-sign this guys after. I think maybe got some of the words, but yeah, I mean, I do think there's like this point where you can have too many rookies, on your roster on any given year. So there's a point of like diminishing returns there where you probably don't want too many of those guys. So getting future first round picks, which you did some of that. So I like that. And the Patriots have done such a good job of this, they always trade back. And what happens is when you trade back or when you trade for future picks, right? Generally those picks are sort of, their value is brought down by 1 round, meaning a future second round pick is worth a third round pick this year, if that makes sense. And people do that because they want the picks now, right? They want the players now. So the future picks are worth less because that's the future. That's tomorrow. I care about today. But if you're an organization that's got your system up and running and your processes going and your coaches in place and you're taking the long view and every year you trade back, you trade a third round pick to get a second, right? Or you trade back later in the first round and pick up a future second. If you can be comfortable with doing that on a regular basis, you're increasing your draft capital overall, right? Because yeah, you're trading for a future second, but if you did it last year, this year you're sitting there with a second round pick that you picked up from doing that last year. So if you keep the process going every year, you actually kind of raise the tide of your overall draft capital, if that makes sense. So I love doing that, right? So yeah. Robert saying, got to have a good balance of vets and rookies on the field, right? Yeah. Jakey the Snakey saying Hutchinson is a big body wide receiver, could use that kind of receiver in this offense. So yeah, listen, when I take receivers, it's generally those bigger guys. So anyway, thanks, Green. I think I appreciate the draft. There's some really nice players on there. Next up, Gazornik, right? Brian, I haven't seen him in the chat, but he's very active in Discord. So he's got this is a night with a lot of double trade backs, huh? He's got 2 trade backs. We've got the Raiders and then the Falcons. And then at pick 8, he took Christian Gonzalez. Obviously he's one of the top 2 cornerbacks. Love him. DeJuan Jones, really good right tackle. I talked about earlier why I'm moving away from DeJuan Jones, but great player, right? No doubt. BJ Ojolari, love that, right? Technician as a pass rusher. He's a guy that if I don't take edge rusher in the first round, he's a guy I often look at in round 2. So I love that. Luke Whippler, we love him as a center prospect, obviously. Devin Achane, probably the fastest. He was, I think, the fastest running back at the combine. He's a little bit smaller back, but if you're looking for that change of pace back with, game-breaking speed, he's a good guy to look at for that. A.T. Perry, we talked about it a lot. We love him. He's got a trade here for Hopkins for a 3rd and a 4th with New England, right? Reunited him with Bill O'Brien, so that'd be an interesting room to be in, right? And then we've got Dwayne McBride, halfback out of UAB, who's showed up on a lot of mock drafts tonight, right? Moro Ojomo, defensive interior line. We've seen him a few times, and probably more of a 3 technique, I think. Nice player to get in, round 4 is good value. Then Kobe Turner. So you've really kind of, in round 4, you've really shored up that defensive line like that. Obviously Zavala, right? He's become the guy that we see on almost every mock draft these days. And he great value. He's always, I know, when you're picking that 5th round pick, that pick 168, he's just always right there in these mock drafts, right? So I get why he's always on these. Mekhi Blackman, so you got another, you got a cornerback there, another one for some depth, right? So I like that. You got you got the blue chip cornerback in Gonzalez, then you've got another developmental guy later, and then Stetson Bennett, the quarterback, right? Agent 47 likes this. Robert Moore likes this. Yeah, Brian, I think this is a good mock. There's always a few things I do different, but that's me, right? But I think you did a really good job with this. I like it. Thank you for submitting this mock. Next up, Dakota Bedard, who I saw in here. Now, Dakota's got some crazy trades in his. Just he really likes to do some trades that are just all over the place. And to be honest, trades aren't realistic, but that's all right. We're going to look at the players. So Brian's saying F-, no punter, but for real good draft. Yeah. So Dakota's having fun with the mocks, right? Just doing some stuff that's all over the place. And that's, it's about fun, right? So you got got to trade Colt McCoy for the 5th pick. I don't think that would really happen, but hey, you do you in the mock drafts, right? So he got us Will Anderson and Jalen Carter. And then the 2nd round, he got Keely Ringo, right? And then did another trade, traded up for 2 spots. Didn't really just traded up. Pittsburgh apparently agreed to give us the 32nd pick for the 34th pick with nothing else at it. But that's, hey, have fun with it, right? So we've got that trade. And then, of course,
it's got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
JMS, and then we got you got a DJ Humphreys trade for a bunch of picks, okay? And then we got Chandler Zavala in the 2nd round, which seems early, but I don't know. Listen, he's going in the 5th round in his mocks, but I wouldn't shock me if he goes on day 2, maybe more towards round 3. But like him, then Tyler Steen, a tackle that I think is a good fit for this offense. So you got him in round 3. Eli Ricks, cornerback, we've seen him in a couple mocks. Then you got Jackson Kirtland at guard. Rashad Torrance, a safety. Ivan Pace Jr., a linebacker. Got another trade, getting a few picks. Carter Warren, a tackle I really like. Trey Dean, another safety. Hunter Lipke, the fullback. Then Leonard Taylor, tight end. Kicker, Jake Moody. Punter, Ethan Evans. And quarterback, Clayton Tune. So Brian gives us an A+, right? Because it's got a punter, right? Robert saying, here comes the spice. But there's a lot of nice players on here. It's very unconventional, right? But, rock on. If you're having fun with it, that's all good. Ryan Lindsay saying, first time I've seen a fullback in a mock draft this year. Yeah, I think the first fullback in Mock Draft Monday this year was our friend Zach Payo-time. I don't know if he's still he was in the chat earlier. He might have had to tune out, but I think he did when he was on as my co-host. I think he had a fullback in his mock. But we haven't seen a lot, but we might need a fullback depending on what they want to do in the offense, right? Mazaki Felix, I don't want the Cardinals draft a project type player early in the first round. We need to make sure draft player will be a success. Okay. I think Monty send a card to Mike Tomlin on that trade. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So anyway, all right, Dakota, thanks for your mock draft. Next up, hiding out now. I don't think I've seen him in the chat, but he's very active in Discord. So he's got a mock where he did a trade back with the Colts. I think he did this type of trade last week as well. Ryan Kelly, the center. This is something that Justin Pugh talked about on Twitter, that he thinks, hey, Cardinals should be looking to package, do a pick with the Colts that includes him. So they got the trade back for the 4th pick and a 2nd round pick in Ryan Kelly. So you got a center there. So I think that's intriguing, right? A starting center. I think they're less likely to look at something like that now that we've seen, they've signed Frodo Holt and they'll probably draft someone, but who knows, right? But, I don't hate that trade. And then you got another trade back, right? With the Tennessee Titans for the 11th pick, picked up a future first, a second in this round, or this draft, a future second, right? Then at 11 got Kalijah Cansey, like we saw in the previous draft. Then, did an interesting trade, like did the Hopkins thing where, and I think I remember now, if mentioned this, I believe when he submitted this at we traded Hopkins and a 2nd round pick for the first round pick of the Patriots, pick 14. And the rationale being that the Patriots like trading back, right? And they like accumulating 2nd round picks. So maybe what they do is they trade their 1st round pick for Hopkins and a 2nd. So I think that's an interesting solution to the whole thing, right? So then he's got, with pick 14, we've got a cornerback, Joey Porter Jr., probably the best press man, right? Press man quarterback, right? Then we got an edge, right? Will McDonald in the 2nd round, a guy with a lot of great traits, tools to develop. Steve Avila, we talked about him before, got a guard. Then Luke Whippler got the center, right? Kendry Miller, halfback, who I really like. Michael Wilson, a receiver that a lot of people really like. I think I saw a thing, I don't know if it was PFF or someone else, put out a tweet with like the receivers in this draft class, like listing different receivers that are the best in this class at a particular trait. And I think Michael Wilson, they talked about, he's the best off, like he's the best at get off, like beating press off the line. So I need to look a little bit more at him. I know a lot of people really like him out of Stanford. Then we got another cornerback, Mekhi Blackman, and then Chandler Zavala, quarterback Clayton Tune. So some interesting moves, some nice players, Robert doesn't like the center trade, but other than that, good draft, right? And maybe Agent 47 also questions like, draft another center, no problem having it, Kelly. Okay. So having the Kelly. So, all right. So anyway, there's some nice players on here. I think he did some interesting things with those trades that mix it up. So I appreciate that. So cool. Thanks for that mock draft. Jordan P saying Michael Wilson is arguably the best route runner in the class. He's super smooth and he just has injury history. That's interesting. Yeah, I know, Jordan, you like him a lot. A lot of other people do. I haven't really looked at him closely enough. I mean, I've looked at it a little bit, but I think he is an interesting prospect there, though, in kind of day 2, day 3, right? Next up, Erva 8. I think that's Moore's Legacy, who was in here earlier. Did an interesting trade. Also, the Patriots. Hopkins for Tyquan Thornton, right? I think a guy they drafted last year as a receiver, and then traded back and got some future draft picks for that 3rd pick and Hopkins. So packaged them together there as well. So that's interesting. Then again, Kalijah Cansey, right? and Beja Ojulari, right? So that's a nice combo there. Like that a lot. Tyreek Stevenson, really like that, right? A cornerback who's could probably come in and start pretty quickly in round 2. Luke Whippler, we love Whippler. And Michael Wilson, we just got done talking about him. So that's a nice, and Jordan P saying those first 5 picks are money. I'm not sure if we're talking about this one or not, but those are some nice picks. Then Moro Jomo, we like him, right? Nice guy to get a little bit on, round 4 is nice value there for interior defensive lineman. Hodges Tomlinson, right? We talked about him. So you got your slot corner, Chandler Zavala. Trevor Reed, a guy I highlighted in my video on offensive linemen that I think are fit for the Cardinals. So developmental tackle like that. Clayton Tune, quarterback out of Houston, and Jalen Wayne, a receiver of South Alabama that I don't know much about, but getting, some depth at receiver like that. More realistic trade this time. Okay, nice. So then I don't remember what you did last time, but I'm sure it was something spicy and fun. So, all right. Yeah, I like getting the draft capital. I think it's an interesting solution with the Hopkins. You've got, we got 3 new receivers. That might be more than we have room for with, the guy we just signed, Pascal. But I like the draft capital. I like the players you took. I think overall it's a really good draft, right? Ryan Lindsay is asking, why is everyone so high on Ojulari? I've never understood why. Well, I know Jordan P will have some thoughts on that. I think it was it Wright who said, it was one of the tackles, I think it might have been Wright, who said that was the toughest matchup he faced. Ojulari, his brother was drafted by the Giants, and I think, has been a decent player. And the thing about him is, he's really like the people who've looked at the film. One of the things I've heard they said about him was he has every pass rush move. Like he's a technician. A lot of the guys coming out have 1 or 2 moves. They've got a fastball and a curveball, and that's it. Ojulari's got a fastball, curveball, slider, knuckleball, and a couple other pitches, right? A spitball. He's got all of it. Now, maybe because he's such a technician, maybe his ceiling isn't as high, meaning he's already kind of closer to his ceiling, whereas you've got other guys that might have more elite physical tools. And that's why he's probably a second rounder, is that he's closer to his ceiling because he's so developed. But if you can get me a guy like that, who's going to get you 8 to 10 sacks, right, in the second round, I would take that, right? So, so a couple comments. Jordan saying, have you watched him? He's the best pass rusher in the draft, only 10 less pressures than Will Anderson. Chris is saying, hope I submit mock draft correctly, and maybe did you just submit that in Discord perhaps? I'll have to see, or on Twitter maybe. But here's what I will tell you. Chris, is I always, if I get your mock draft, I always reply with a comment saying saved it. So if you don't get a message from me that I saved it, try making, reaching out to me on, tag me on Twitter, or if you're not part of the Discord, there's a link below. Join the Discord. There's a text, there's a chat room in there to submit it. But if I don't respond saying saved it, then I didn't get it. Hopefully I do though. I'll check obviously when we get done. Agent 47 says his tape is good. Jordan P says Ojulari presents a whole array of skills. He has bend, can win with hands, spin move, speed, everything. He just needs to add some strength to be a 3-down guy. Okay. BJ has a deep toolbox. Ryan Lindsay is saying, never watched his tape. I was just wondering why. Thanks for the explanation. Yeah. Hey, that's what we're here for though, right? We're here to learn about these prospects. So I'm glad that, we could help, share our perspectives on it, right? Teo Capero, thanks for being here again. I know you got your comment earlier, but I don't really understand the hype on Tyreek Stevenson. I think there are other day 2 quarterbacks that are better. Yeah, I think what I've read about him at least is that he is a guy who's a little bit of a higher floor, but not as high of it, but his ceiling's a little lower than some of the other guys. He's a guy who's maybe closer to being ready to come in and start, but doesn't have the elite traits of some of the others. I don't know. I mean, to me, I don't feel like he's hyped because you don't see him in our mock drafts a lot. There's a lot of other guys that are being taken. But there are other day 2 guys that I think, people like better. I think I said this earlier, like, it's really going to come down to whoever Jonathan Gannon likes, right? He's going to like somebody, and whoever it is whoever it is and whoever he takes, right, is going to be the right fit, right? So we'll see. But yeah, I think, but there's a lot of guys I like on day 2, right? Chris saying tagged on Twitter. Okay. Was it, let me know, was this before tonight or was just now? Because if it was before night and you tagged me, first of all, if I responded, then I saved it. If I didn't, then I might have missed it. Jordan Peace saying Stevenson is big and physical. That's why people like him. Teo Capero saying, so kind of similar to the only as good as your weakest link term of higher floor. In some ways, yeah, he's a guy who's going to be solid and maybe better than solid, but yeah. All right. And then Ryan Lindsay saying he only allowed, I think, 17 receptions this year. That's probably the main standout. Okay, Chris saying just now. Chris, what's your Twitter? What's your name on Twitter? Because I got tagged on one, but it's not Chris Smith. So I want to know if that's you or not. I've got Ryan Lindsay just tagged me on a mock. Okay. I'll check for that though. Okay, so good mock. Next up, we have Delarcy. I hope I did not mispronounce that. Delasry. I apologize. I'm sure I butchered that. Mock draft from D Delasry. So got the similar trade back, right, with the Colts for getting Kelly in that, Ryan Kelly. Trading back to number 4, getting Will Anderson Jr., right? And then we've got, so we love that, right? Anton Harrison, like a tackle around 2, right? An interesting, prospect there. And then we've got Jahmyr Gibbs, guy a lot of people have compared to Alvin Kamara in terms of the play style, right, out of Alabama. So that change of pace back. Then we got Luke Whippler, center. So, in round 2. So like him. Then we got a Hopkins trade to the Cowboys for a 2nd and a 5th, right? And then we've got Garrett Williams, a guy who's shown up before. So cornerback that I think is interesting. Michael Wilson, the receiver. I know obviously we talked about him, good player. Moro Ojomo, like him. Then we got cornerback. So another cornerback. So we got the 2 cornerbacks there, Jacorian Bennett. So we got one in round 3 and round 5, then a linebacker for depth, a defensive interior lineman, Jared Clark, and then quarterback Lee Cunningham out of Louisville. All right. So there's some nice players here, probably a few things. If it's me, I'm doing different. I probably want to get, I don't know. Like maybe I don't go halfback quite that early. That's just me, I guess. I'd probably go a little bit later, but that, he's a good player though. I mean, it's the kind of running back we need. So I don't hate that. Wilson's a nice receiver. So, I mean, overall there's a lot of good players here. So I don't hate that. Maybe there's a few things I do differently, but, overall I'd say it's pretty solid. Really liked what you did getting Anderson, obviously, like Williams, Wilson, Ojomo, some really nice players in there. Obviously Whippler, Chris saying SM Daddy 2267. I don't think I saw that, but would you do me a favor and try tagging me one more time on that? I apologize, and we'll get it sorted out after the live stream. I definitely want to get that though. Jordan P saying something with Wilson that could be notable as he wears number 4 at Stanford. Our wide receiver coach was also a former Stanford receiver who wore number 4. Could be nothing or could be something. Love the fit. Okay. Agent 47 saying that trade with the Cowboys won't happen anymore. And I think this was submitted before the Brandon Cooks trade. So obviously that changes the calculus there. That's not likely to happen now, but appreciate the mock though. Some really nice players and like that trade there. So thank you. Next up, Judai. So Judai's got a trade. It got cut off on what I didn't get the full screenshot on that. But going to 5. So got, I think that's Seattle, right? So traded back, got Will Anderson. So we like trading back in Will Anderson, obviously, and then pick 20, which is part of let's see, was that part of that trade. Oh, was that the Lions? Maybe that's the Lions. Okay. No, that's not. They don't have that. That's Seattle, 5-20. That's right. Okay. And then so you got Kalijah Cansey at 20. So if we pulled that off, that'd be insane, right? Love Anderson and Cansey. DeJuan Jones, good right tackle. We talked about him earlier. I like other players for the fit there, but he's a great player. So, not gonna totally, kill that. Then we've got a trade to get some additional picks. Darius Rush, cornerback in the second round out of South Carolina. So we got some cornerback help. Got the Hopkins trade which is what you use for that pick, or for that for Rush. Then we got Luke Whippler, like that. Moro Jomo, he's shown up a lot. Jonathan Mingo, a receiver I know a lot of people like out of Mississippi. I know Jordan's a fan. Jonathan Mingo, 1 of 5, super underrated, has all the traits of a really good NFL wide receiver. Just with this draft, people talked about the first round receivers they're not horrible, but it's not as good as last year's draft class. But there's some interesting receivers later like that, right? Dwayne McBride, halfback, who's shown up a lot of drafts. Obviously, Chandler Zavala, Antonio Maffi, a nice guard there. Stetson Bennett and Jake Bobo. So got a couple receivers in there. So, yeah, there's some really nice players. Love Anderson, Cansey, obviously. Whippler, right? Ojomo, obviously Zavala. Mingo's a nice pick there, right? So like that. Ryan's saying, I like how all these will usually have a center drafted high up. Our interior offensive line needs serious improvement. 100%. That is such a huge need. I'm not sure if they're going to go that early, though, because I did a video about the way that I suspect that Monty Ossenfort might draft if he's influenced by what he learned with the Patriots. And they don't go those interior offensive linemen before round 3 or 4 usually. So it'll be interesting to see if he deviates from that and goes earlier with center, which, I mean, a lot of my mock drafts have that. So I get that, right? Seahawks trading didn't get Anderson. I wonder who they got. Probably a quarterback, right? So yeah, they got Richardson. Okay. Probably, right? Yeah. The record with and without Hudson is alarming. Get a good center, right? Yeah. Tio saying Jalen Moreno Cooper is one of my favorite late round wide receivers. He's shown up a few times. I need to check him out a little bit. So, Judai, thanks for the mock. There's some really good stuff on here. I like it. Next up, Red Sea. There is Corey's mock. He was in the chat earlier. So he's got the trade with Washington, right? Who is an interesting, we talk about who's going to trade up for a quarterback, and Washington's an intriguing team to do that. Who did they, man, my brain's not working. Who did they sign? Someone help me in the chat. I know they signed a quarterback who's kind of a bridge starter, right? So they're not out of the quarterback market, in my opinion, right? So they could still look to trade up and get a quarterback. So you traded back with them, got a bunch of picks because it's such a far back trade, get a future first, future second, future 6+ this year, right? Yeah, Jacoby Brissett, that's right. Thank you. Right. So he's the guy I had hoped we'd get, for the Cardinals. So, so we've got, they've got a bridge quarterback. So, and they don't and Heineke went to Atlanta, I think. So, this is a team that I think could be a sneaky team that might look to trade it for a quarterback, right? And if you trade back that far to 16, you're getting a lot of draft capital, right? So you got Kalijah Cansey at 16. Love that, right? And then we got Steve Avila and Luke Whippler shoring up that interior offensive line there in round 2. Garrett Williams, cornerback late in round 2, right? So player, again, got the injury there, but still like him. Then we got the Hopkins trade for a second and a future 6. It's sadly starting to look like it might be not that much that we get in trade, but we'll see. So then we've got A.T. Perry. We love A.T. Perry, obviously. Victor Gonzalez Correa. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Saying A.T. Perry is my best wide receiver in 3rd or 4th round. Yeah, I have a feeling he's going to go round 3, maybe even round 2, but probably round 3 feels like the right spot. But maybe he goes if people really like him, right? Isaiah McGuire, an edge rusher out of Missouri, so like developmental edge a little bit later, right? Nathaniel Dell, we talked about him a lot in previous weeks, right? A speedy receiver. He's actually kind of good off the line, even though he's small, right? So that'd be nice, kind of interesting addition. Moro Ojomo, he's been in a lot of mock drafts. Chandler Zavala, obviously. Keith Mitchell getting a halfback a little bit later, right, out of East Carolina. So wait until late day 3. Quarterback Willie Cunningham. And then Brian will be happy with this. It's got punter Michael Turk, right? So yeah, interesting. So I think there's a lot of good stuff in here, right? Agent 47 trade down to 16 don't worth at least 2 future firsts. So you got a future first, second, and 6 plus a first, second, fourth, and fifth, 6 here. Yeah, I have to wonder if you might get the 24 and 25 first in that, right? So, maybe you could get more, right? But there's a lot of nice players here, right? Ryan's asking, could Tank Dell actually fall to the 4th? I don't think he's going to in real life. I think he's probably going to go on day 2 somewhere, round 2 or 3, but he falls in these mocks all the time. People just don't seem to take him, but I think he's going to go earlier than that in reality, but he ends up a lot of people's mocks because you get there in the 4th round. It's like, this guy's ranked 43 on the board here and he's still there. How's that happening? Right. And it's influenced because it's, the mock drafts now have the average draft position by users is more heavily weighted than PFF's rankings, at least in the default settings. So I think he'll be gone, right? Oh, we got a Chris, new member. Thank you for becoming a channel member. I appreciate the support. Anyone else who wants to become a member, there's a link below. Thank you so much. Great community of folks who help support the channel. I really appreciate that. So thank you so much. Red Sea, I didn't want to take Tank Dell, but he just fell way too far for me not to take him. Yeah, I feel that, right? For sure. Robert Moore saying, good trade value from Washington, set up next year's draft nicely. Overall, good draft. Awesome. All right. Good draft, Corey. It's almost like you do a lot of mock drafts or something. Are you working on the 2027 draft class yet, Red Sea? He's always way ahead. Okay. Next up, we have Charlie Magic submitted this on Twitter. So he's got a trade back with the Raiders, picking up some future picks and some picks on day 2 this year, right, in the swap. Then we have Christian Gonzalez, obviously one of the best cornerbacks in the draft class. Love that. Mazzy Smith, love that, right? Felix Anuduke Ozumo, I'm sure I mispronounced that, out of Kansas State. Really nice edge rusher. Really, like in that second round, if you're waiting to the second round for an edge rusher, this guy's he's up there with Ojulari as another guy that you're looking at. So he's one of those guys. If you trade out and you don't get a pass rusher in round 1, he's a guy you should look at, right? Luke Whippler, right? Love him at center. Andrew Voorhees. So, obviously Voorhees had the unfortunate injury at the combine, still did the bench press, right? Despite the ACL injury, he's going to be out. He's going to be a red shirt kind of a guy. A lot of people still draft him, and it's tricky because, like, in reality, he's probably going to either go undrafted or he's going to go late on I think he's going to go late on day 3. Someone's going to draft him and stash him, like, oh, well, we can use a 6th or 7th round pick on a guy who should have been a 3rd round pick, and we're going to hold on to him and let him recover and have a good guard in the future, right? And I think a lot of folks who take him, that's the thought process. And unfortunately, though, the mock draft, where he falls in the mock drafts has not caught up, so to speak, with the injury. Like, he's going to probably go later, but based on the rankings and the average draft position, if you want to take him, you have to take him somewhere around 3 or 4. Right. So, so yeah. And, Robert's saying, hey, Joe, with Voorhees injury, with his trade value drop, if so, does PFF take that in consideration with his draft? I think they do take it into consideration. Like, he's ranked 134. I don't know where he was before, but the problem with that is, like I mentioned, like, if you go, when you do your mock drafts, if you look at the settings, right, when you look at the settings, like, there's a slider, and you can tell it how you want it to do the AI logic, right? And there's settings about how randomness, picking for need, things like that. And one of those sliders is you can go more towards the PFF rankings or more towards the user average draft position, where he gets drafted by people like us, aggregately, right? So because there have been so many mock drafts before he got injured, and a lot of people who may not know about the injury or not pay attention still drafting him or whatever, or people, like Charlie here, who's still taking around 3 because he wants him for that very reason we're talking about, right? He would want in real life he'd wait to round 6. Yeah, I figured that was the case, but and I think you maybe mentions you took him here because you understand that you in real life you take him around 6, but in this to get him you got to take him earlier because it hasn't caught up yet. At some point, I think it's going to catch up a little bit more, but I think it's just the data, have too many. There's too many points where he was drafted, by users higher, and it's kind of skewing that. If you move the slider more towards PFF's rankings, he's ranked 134, so he'll go a little bit later that way, right? So yeah. Now, I've talked about this kind of thing, maybe taking him on day 3, stashing him, right? And I think you can't give this a grade, this grade A draft, a grade B to the Voorhees pick. I don't hate the idea of taking him in round 6 or 7 and stashing him in general. But for me, there's a secondary issue with Voorhees. And for me, the secondary issue is that when I did the research for that video on offensive linemen for the Cardinals, he did not, at least from what I read, come across as a good fit for a wide zone scheme. He's a better fit for a power running scheme or maybe an inside zone scheme. So for me, I'm not taking him as much because of the fact that I think there are other guards that are a better fit for the scheme. Right. But he's a great player. Obviously we hope for the recovery. I think someone taking around 6, and stashing a team's going to hopefully get a good player. Hopefully he's going to recover. Right. Then we got AT Perry, right? Perry at 100, right? Round 3, right? TL likes that, right? Fire draft, right? Love that. Chandler Zavala, you took him a little earlier than pick 168, but I think where you've taken him is closer to realistic, right? I think he's going before round 5. So I like Zavala there. Dwayne McBride, halfback out of UAB. He's been on a lot of mock drafts. Viliami Fehoko, edge rusher out of San Jose State. I haven't looked at him much. I need to look at him a little bit more. One of those day 3 edge rushers, right? Developmental guy. Then Dorian Thompson Robinson, we talked about him earlier. One of the, for me, if we're taking a quarterback on day 3, to me, there are 3 quarterbacks I'm looking at. DTR is one of them. The guy, BYU, Jaron Hall, and Hooker out of Tennessee. Those are the 3 I'm looking at on day 3. Now, Hooker might go day 2, like in the 3rd round, but could go day 3, right? So, yeah. Let's see. Ryan Lindsay saying kind of like a Trevor Penning situation. He's probably going to have to sit his first year strictly due to injury. Yeah, right. That kind of a situation. We can say that A.T. Perry takes over JMS spot as favorite draft player of Cardinals fans. I think there's enough people who are on the Luke Whippler camp, or, that as much as we love John Michael Schmitz and he has the greatest jingle ready made for him, I think there's enough people who are taking Luke Whippler that A.T. Perry might. The only guy that I think is more unanimous, though, is Chandler Zavala. He's a guy, he's on almost every draft. But A.T. Perry, right? So could be, right? Yes, simply, right? Listen, I'm a dad, so it's like I love both of my sons. I love all my children's, right? So we love John Michael Schmitz. We love A.T. Perry. We love Chandler Zavala, right? There's a lot of players we love, right? But yeah, A.T. Perry, man, he might overtake. He doesn't have a song, but man, he's good. And if you haven't already seen, like Brett Coleman and EJ Snyder, they have the Bootleg podcast on YouTube, Bootleg Football Podcast, and they have it on YouTube. And they posted a video of an interview with A.T. Perry. They also have one with Chandler Zavala and couple other players, but the A.T. Perry interview is really good. Check it out. It's definitely worth checking out. So all right, like the mock draft, Charlie, and I totally understand what you're doing for Voorhees. I understand. When I understood why you took him at 3, because he's not going to he wouldn't last longer than that, and you would have taken him at 6. So you had to kind of work that a little bit. Again, for me, Voorhees is a good player. I just there's other guys I like better as a scheme fit, but I totally understand what we did there. Love a lot of the players on here, though, right? Absolutely. Next up, Brian Ostrander. Brian was in the chat earlier. He's got a punter, of course, right? So he's got the trade back with the Colts, taking Will Anderson, number 4. Love that. Emmanuel Forbes in the second round, the ball hawking cornerback. Love that. Steven Vila and Luke Whippler fixing that interior offensive line. Love that. Got a trade with Hopkins to the Cowboys before the Brandon Cooks trade happened, obviously, right? Got Jarrett Williams, cornerback. So you got another cornerback. So really loaded up there with a couple really nice players. So I like that, right? We're going to need some depth there. A.T. Perry, enough said. Moro Ojomo, nice interior defensive lineman. A lot of repeat guys here, right? Dwayne McBride, Ventrell Miller, linebacker out of Florida. So got some depth on the linebacker like that. Got a little trading there to get a little extra draft capital. Got that nose tackle and DJ Dale guy I've taken a lot of drafts as that, day 3 nose tackle. So like that. And obviously got the punter, Bryce Behringer. You're the expert on punters. I haven't looked. I got so burnt with last year's He Who Should Not Be Named punter that I haven't really looked at them, but obviously carrying the torch for punters. So love the Will Anderson pick, obviously, with the trade, getting the draft capital, doubling up at the cornerbacks. Love that. Fixing the interior offensive line, A.T. Perry. I mean, this is a solid draft, right? Across the board. Well done. If the Cardinals draft JMS, you need to do like a 1-hour remix of the JMS song, right? Yeah. Oh man, that would be epic if they did, right? All right, Brian, good mock draft. You got the punter, so you give that an A+, I'm sure, right? Okay. Next up, there he is. All right, this is the point in the show every night, ladies and gentlemen. Wait, that's someone else's line, isn't it? That's the point every week where, even though Robert has disappointed his son by not drafting John Michael Schmitz, Joe comes in to give an assist to Robert, to help him, give a helping hand, and make his son happy. That's right, folks. It is the time of the night when we do the full John Michael, He's Our Center Schmitz song. Enjoy.
John Michael, he's our center Schmitz. His name's on my draft too. No matter what they say, this mock is A-okay. It's got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
All right. So is Robert saying this for his son, right? Yeah, I laugh if it's really Robert who's like, I want the John Michael Schmidt song. No, his son is watching. His son enjoys it. I hope your son enjoyed it. Once again, this goes out to you, buddy. All right, so the actual draft got the trade back with the Falcons, picking up some future draft capital and some a second and third this year and a second next year, right? And then getting Devin Witherspoon, right? He's laughing. Awesome. Mission accomplished. We've got Devin Witherspoon, great cornerback. Love him. He's the guy who's going to, really play physically. He's got play slot outside, right? Love that pick. I've described him as, I think, a better version of Byron Murphy Jr. And I loved Murphy, but I think Witherspoon's like better version of what he brings. BJ Ojolari, we talked about him. So you got that edge rusher in round 2. Mazzy Smith, a guy that we've seen a lot tonight. I love him right there. I take him in the second round a lot. So we got edge, and then we got the nose tackle. Luke Whippler got the center, right? Got the Hopkins trade for a second round pick. Then we got another cornerback, right, from Syracuse, Garrett Williams. So you got, a nice combination there. You got Witherspoon who can play inside or outside, then Williams maybe put him on the outside a little bit more consistently, move Witherspoon around a little bit. That's a nice pairing. A.T. Perry, we love him. Moro Jomo, Dwayne McBride, Chandler Zavala. Those picks have been on a lot of mocks tonight. Clayton Tune getting that quarterback. I know you like Stetson Bennett a lot too. So you mix it up here, right? And then Ronnie Bell getting another receiver there who, I profiled earlier in Mock Draft Monday season. A nice guy to be like, kind of a depth receiver there. So yeah, I think I really like this, right? You hit on all the things we're looking for. Love the cornerbacks that you paired up there, right? Ojolari and Mazzy Smith, really like that. Got some additional depth with Ojomo. Yeah, I think Nailed it, right? Good job on this one. Omar saying, what if we trade Rondale Moore or Hop to the Chiefs for Hop or maybe a fourth for Rondale? I think, I think Hopkins is going to be traded. I don't think it's going to be a first round pick. I just think the value isn't there. Did I say a depth receiver? I meant depth receiver. Thanks. Yeah, maybe I've been talking a little bit long, right? The words don't come out well all the time. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think Rondo Moore with the injury history, I don't know that anyone's going to offer a lot for him right now, or even I think there is more value right now. I think there's more value to the Cardinals to hold on to Rondale Moore and see if they can get him healthy and see if, Drew Petzing in the different offense they're going to run can get better production. I mean, when he's been healthy, he's been really good. I think there's more value to the Cardinals to keep him and see if he can become the player they hoped than there is to trade him right now. But I do think Hopkins trading, I mean, the Chiefs are a team that a lot of people talk about. It doesn't look like it's going to be first, and it's starting to look like it might not be a second. I mean, it sounds like they're trying to hold out for a second, and part of the reason he hasn't been traded is because I think they haven't got the offer they want. So, yeah, I don't think you get a fourth for Rondale right now. I love Rondale Moore. For some reason, the receiver market is not as good as I'd hoped it would be. And I mean, you look at players, what they're getting traded for. So Teo's got to get out here. Hey, appreciate you hanging out, man. Can't wait for next week. Really appreciate you dropping by for as long as you did. So Robert, good mock though. Next up, a friendly Viking. With the mock draft. He's got a couple trade backs. We got the Lions trade and then the Eagles trade. So move back a couple times, picking up future first. Let's see. No, it's all picks from this year, huh? Yeah, it looks like you got a couple first round picks. Okay, so you got a couple extra first round picks and then a fifth round pick. Okay, and so we got Devin Witherspoon, love that. Kalijah Cansey, and then BJ Ojulari at pick 30 in the first round. So we got him a little earlier. So that's a nice group, right? Witherspoon, Cansey, and Ojulari. That's a nice way to shore up the defense there. Luke Whippler, we love him, right? Then you got another trade to get some extra picks. Perry, obviously, enough said, we love him. Travis Hodges and Tomlinson, so you got him as your true slot corner, and then Witherspoon maybe play outside more. Kendra Miller, halfback like that. Got another edge and Jose McGuire to develop. Chandler Zavala, Moro Ojomo, then Jalen Moreno Cropper, the receiver of Fresno State, Tony Amafi, and Jake Moody, the kicker. Love what you did with those defensive players early on. That's just a really nice, kind of way to shore that up. Getting the center, getting Perry, we love that. Getting the slot corner, running back, get a developmental edge. Yeah, I like it. I think you got a lot of good players, a lot of players I like. Traded back, got extra draft capital, got some good value. So I think this is a really nice mock. Well done. Next up, Mr. Money Minetti. I don't think I've seen you in the chat tonight, but very active in Discord. He's got a trade back with the Raiders to 7, getting a future first and a second this year, and still getting Will Anderson. That's crazy. Probably isn't happening, but obviously you love the value there. Then Kalijah Cansey falling to the second round. Wow, someone bribed someone. I don't know. So love that. And then Mazi Smith at pick 38. Eli Ricks in the third round. Man, that is a nice set of picks. Like Anderson, Cansey, and Smith. My goodness, I would love getting that combination, right? Then getting the cornerback Ricks, Michael Wilson, receiver we talked about, getting Hobinson. So you got the outside corner in Ricks, slot and Hodges Hobinson. Then you got the center a little bit later, Olusegun Olatimi, a center that I really like out of Michigan. So you waited a little bit, which I think is, maybe more likely that's what what I talked about that earlier. Like if Austin Ford does what the Patriots do, that's a more likely scenario than a second round center. Chandler Zavala, love him. Then in round 5, getting a Zach Kuntz, a tight end out of Old Dominion, getting some depth at tight end, right? And I don't mind taking a tight end on day 3, getting someone for some depth. Ertz is a little bit older. right? And, we don't know what's going on with the health of Max Williams, right? And if he's going to be back or not. So don't mind getting some depth there. Then you went 2 Old Dominion players in a row, right? So that's interesting. Nick Saldivari, the tackle who, I talked about, he was on the list, the long list of players that I think fit the wide zone. So he'd be an interesting pick. Then Jake Bobo, big receiver out of UCLA. So yeah, love those first, 4 picks. Olatimi I like. So yeah, I think this is a good mock. Nicely done. Next up, Awesome Robert 20. He's got another trade that a little suspect here. Max Crosby, the pick with the trade with the Raiders to get a future first, second, third, and a first this year, and Max Crosby. That that's not realistic. They're not trading Max Crosby like that. I mean, they're not going to look to trade him. He's a really good player for them, and if they did, they're certainly not giving him as this part of this deal. But the draft picks are fairly realistic. It's just the Max Crosby part isn't realistic. But Will Anderson at 7, man, if he fell there, that'd be great. He's not going to, but that would be a heck of a pick. Josh Downs, small receiver plays big. If you're going to get a small receiver, he's a nice one to get. Good contested catch. DeJuan Jones, we talked about him earlier. Get that right tackle. Maybe a little, maybe not the perfect fit for the offense, but he'd be good. Luke Whipper, we love that. Devin Ashane, speedy back. Hodges Tomlinson, talked about him a lot. Ozomo, love that. Cam Jones getting depth at linebacker, getting a quarterback on day 3, and then some depth at safety, Brandon Hill out of Pittsburgh. So, yeah, there's a lot of players I like on here, right? Crosby and Anderson, okay, right? Yeah, so all right, there's a lot of good players on here. The trade's a little interesting, not realistic, but okay. Next up we have Dominic. Dominic's got a trade back with the Lions, and then again with the Bears. So got a double trade back, getting some future second round picks and some multiple picks this year. Got Christian Gonzalez at 9, then Kalijah Cansey at 18, BJ Ojolari in the second round. Then Steve Avila has got a trade for Hopkins for a second to 4th. DeJuan Jones, Luke Whippler, right? Shoring up that offensive line early, right? Eli Ricks got another cornerback, so you've got a couple cornerbacks there. A.T. Perry, love him. Nathaniel Dell, so you're really, really getting us some nice receivers there. A small, fast one and a tall one who's a little bit fast, right? So like that. Ojomo, love that. Another cornerback. So we got 3 cornerbacks. That's probably more than we have room for, where we're going to have room for when it's all said and done. I think we'll probably sign a free agent, but still, nonetheless, like the players you're taking there. Chandler Zavala, love that. Halfback, Eric Gray a little bit later, but nice value. Then quarterback Stetson Bennett. So, yeah, got some nice draft capital for the future. Also added picks here. Got a lot of nice players. Love, man, Gonzalez, Cansey, and Ojolari. That would be a heck of an addition there to the defense. So some nice offensive line players. Yeah, nicely done, Dominic. I think it's a good mock. Next, Austin Hoy, Breadstick Daddy. He was in the chat earlier. Not sure if he's still here. All right, he's stuck at 3, and is Mick getting a little bit spicier with Jalen Carter? I think Jalen Carter is going to be off the Cardinals board after everything that's gone on. We've talked about that. Could end up being good, but I think they're just between the whole tragic situation with the car accident, but as much as anything, the way he wasn't prepared for his pro day, I think is going to also give some question marks about his preparation. But someone's going to get him, and if he still has a chance to be really good, but I think he's going to be off the Cardinals board, in my opinion. But then Emmanuel Forbes in the second round. You got a ball hawking cornerback. Joe Tippmann, he's a center. I haven't talked about him a lot, but I've talked about him a little bit. He's a lot of people think might be the best fit for the system, the wide zone system in this draft at center. He's taller, but he's really good. He's the best pulling center in the draft, at least according to PFF. So he's an interesting guy to look at as a fit. And it wouldn't shock me if they took him. We haven't talked about as much as Whippler or John Michael Schmitz, but he would be a good fit for that offense in terms of what they want to do. Got the Hopkins trade with the Chiefs for a second and 4th round pick. Got Michael Wilson, the receiver. A lot of people we've talked about. Isaiah McGuire, developmental edge. Kobe Turner, love him. more Ojomo, some more interior defensive line help, Dwayne McBride, the halfback, Chandler Zavala, and then DJ Dale. You have really, really shored up the defensive line. Carter, Turner, Ojomo, and DJ Dale. Like defensive line. Defensive line's going to be set, right? And then you got an edge rusher in there. So, and then you got a center and a guard. So really shoring up the trenches here, right? But still getting a cornerback in there. So like that. So there's some nice players here. I mean, I'm not taking Jalen Carter anymore because of what's going on. Certainly not at 3, but I know you pay a lot of attention to stuff. So you had a reason for that. Maybe you're just mixing it up or making a point about that you like Carter. But some nice players on here, no doubt. All right, cool. Next up, let's have some fun is the name that in Twitter, or I mean in Discord, that they're submitted under. Got a trade back with the Lions, right? And then another trade back. So 2 trade backs, right? To get a couple picks in the late first round. Kalijah Cansey, we talked about. Then Osiris Torrance, arguably the best guard in this draft class at pick 20. Now, Torrance is a guy when I did my video on the offensive line prospects, is a guy that I didn't include on that list because like he's one of those guys who could play in the offense, but he's much better suited to a power run or an inside zone. So I just don't think he's a great fit for the wide zone. I mean, you could draft him and he can play in it and probably be good because he's just that physically, gifted. I mean, he's big and strong is what he really is. But I'm not taking him because he's just not a great fit. Similar to DeJuan Jones. DeJuan Jones probably be a little bit better fit, but great player though. I'm not taking him early because I'm not using a premium pick on a player who's not a good fit, right? You can make it work, but I'd rather go back a couple rounds and get someone, who's a better fit, right? And use those premium picks on a different position. So that's me, but good player though, no doubt. So we got Torrance, Jones, Tyreek Stevenson, good cornerback we talked about before. Joe Tippmann, like we just talked about, probably the best, fit for this offense. Like getting him in the 3rd round is really good value because PFF has him as the 53rd rated center. You've got our player overall. You've got him at pick 65, right? Then Garrett Williams got the cornerback there. So you've got 2 cornerbacks to help, right? Shore up that room. Nick Herbig, an edge rusher to develop on day 2. Then you got a halfback out of Auburn, take Bigsby. So you got the running back we need. Andrew Voorhees, another person probably getting him to stash him, right? So we talked about it earlier. Nathaniel Dell, good speed receiver. Dwayne McBride got so you got 2 halfbacks, right? Got some extra players in there. And then we have Yasir Abdullah, an edge out of Louisville. Interesting guy. Haven't talked about him much, but he's an interesting guy if you're looking for a developmental edge later. He's got some nice traits to work with. So that's an interesting prospect there. Then we got Chandler Zavala. Obviously love him. Jared Clark, an interior defensive lineman on day 3. Then I got some depth at center, and Alex Forsyth, a guy who I profiled in my video that he's a guy that fits what they're doing offensively. So, there's some nice players in here. Maybe some players I'm not taking because of the scheme fit, but yeah, some really good players in this draft. Thanks for submitting that. Agent 47 saying, I'm not going to lie. When I saw the nickname, I thought he would draft Richardson. Okay. Yeah. Right. Just trying to mix things up and have some fun, right? All right. So thanks for submitting a draft. Next up, Connects 3322. I know I think he messaged that he wasn't going to be able to be in here tonight, Matthew, but appreciate you submitting. One of our friends from Canada, part of the TCR family. So he's got a trade back with the Lions and still gets Will Anderson. Crazy good to have that happen, right? I talked about this earlier. I don't think the Lions would want to include the pick 6 and 18. I think they'd rather include a future first. I think they want to keep one of those 2 in a trade up scenario. But getting Anderson, Canty, and then Adebawari, that's a murderer's row of pass rushers, right? If we pulled that off, that would be nice, right? Then we got the center and Tippmann, right? So, we talked about him. Hodges Thomason got our slot cornerback. Kendry Miller got that halfback we're looking for. Then you got 2 centers, Olusegun Timmy in round 4, right? So now I wonder, I know some of like one of the profile in Joe Tippmann talks about how some people might want to move him to guard. So I wonder if in this scenario, what you're doing is moving Tippmann to guard and keeping Olatimi at center, right? So I could, that could be nice. Nathaniel Dell, speedy receiver there, right? Got a trade to get some extra picks. We've got more Ojomo again, defensive, like probably a 3 technique, so more defensive line help. Trey Palmer, receiver out of Nebraska. I haven't looked a lot at him. I think he's big and fast, so I need to look at him a little bit more. And then we've got Dwayne McBride, halfback, right? So we got another halfback really filling out that room. Chandler Zavala, obviously we love him. Jalen Moreno Cropper, another, got a bigger receiver, I believe. Malasala Amove Laulu, I'm sure I butchered that, tackle out of Oregon. And then Dorian Thompson Robinson, the quarterback, right? One of the guys I like on day 3. So there's a lot of interesting picks. Josh Butts, thanks for being here from No Butts About It, who's going to be on the show. I think, is it next week? I think next week, you and Chris, coming up. Only starting centers on the line, right? Yeah, we've had a problem where we don't have any healthy centers that are true centers. So we're going to go the other way. We're going to just draft all the centers, right? And start a bunch of centers, right? Yeah. So, okay. There's some really nice players on here. Love Anderson, Cansey, Nadwari, right? Like Tippmann. I wouldn't double dip on the centers. I'm probably not moving. Yes. Next week, been practicing. Awesome. Looking forward to it. But there's a lot of players I like here. Kendry Miller, Zavala, right? So, yeah, Matthew, overall, good mock. Maybe there's always a few things I do differently, but yeah, like it. Next up, Tim Thiel. Thanks for submitting your mock, Tim. He's got a trade back with the Lions and the Falcons, got a couple of trades. So, a lot of, really popular kind of move to get a couple first-round picks. Christian Gonzalez, love, Christian Gonzalez is a prospect, obviously. Kalijah Cansey been showing up a lot lately. Love him. And then in the second round,
it's got John Michael, he's our center Schmitz.
Any mock draft with John Michael Schmitz is a winner, right? So we love that. Steve Avila, so you get center and guard, shoring up between him, DeJuan Jones, John Michael Schmitz, and Steve Avila, shoring up the offensive line. Devin Ashane got that speedy halfback, right? Then Byron Young out of Tennessee got another edge rusher in there, to develop with. Then Zach Harrison, a little bit bigger edge. So you got a couple guys to develop there, right? Xavier Hutchinson, that receiver, big receiver out of Iowa State. Then a safety, right? We got, Rashard Torrance second. So some depth at safety, then depth at linebacker, and a quarterback. So, yeah, there's some nice players on here, right? Yeah, finally JMS, right? Clap, 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 right? Yeah, love Gonzalez and Cansey, love Schmitz, right? So I like getting developmental edge rushers in the middle rounds. That's what Baltimore's done forever. If you can commit to that and develop them, that can work out nicely. So yeah, there's some really nice players in here, Jim. Thank you for submitting that. Then we have Lance Sheridan. Thanks for submitting. He submitted this on Twitter. Longtime part of our TCR community. He's got a trade back with the Falcons to get some extra picks and future picks. And he talked about really focus on the trenches and cornerback here, right? So starting Christian Gonzalez, love that, right? And then Mazi Smith, he's been on a lot of mocks. Love him as a nose tackle, interior defensive lineman. Got the center and Luke Whippler. Love A.T. Perry, obviously. Then got some more interior defensive line help with Byron Young, a really good interior defensive lineman on day 2. Nice player there. Then we've got Travis Hodges-Thomason, got that slot cornerback, right, to go along with Gonzalez. So we really helped that cornerback room. Moro Jomo, defensive interior out of Texas. So love him as like that 3 technique. Chandler Zavala, obviously we love him, the guard. Halfback Dwayne McBride, then tight end Zach Kuntz, getting some depth there. So yeah, this is a solid mock, Lance. I really like it. Maybe I'd like to see an edge rusher in there somewhere, especially now that Marcus Golden, they released him and, they probably need to get someone on the edge, but you've got some nice players on the interior defensive line, helping the offensive line with guard and center. Love Perry. So yeah, this is a really nice draft, Lance. I think you did a good job. Appreciate it. There we go. Oh my goodness. We have gotten through all of the mock drafts, right? So wow, finally, right? So wait, try out I've got some new graphics. There's my new solo thing with TCR. All right. Yeah. So Josh is going to draft John Michael Schmitz just to see that clip, right? Yeah. So, all right. Well, it's been another marathon edition of TCR Mock Draft Monday, 2 hours, 24 minutes. Appreciate all of your mock drafts. The draft is kind of around the corner. We only have, I don't know, maybe about 4 or 5 more of these. I was looking at the calendars. There's not a ton of these left. So we are all getting prepared for the draft, and we're all going to be much more, familiar with the draft prospects. So it's been a lot of fun. I am going to put up the shout outs for the channel members to thank them. And I've got a new name I'll get on there tonight after, for our next one. But thank you all for being here. Appreciate everyone. Yeah, it's only like 37, 38 days, man. I can hardly wait, right? All right. Thank you all for being here. We're going to get out of here, do our shout outs for channel members, and we'll see you all next time. Peace.
Hey, yo, it's Joe Mo. He's the host of Mock Draft Monday on the Cardinals show. So join the live, hit like and subscribe. Enjoy the podcast tonight. Enjoy the podcast tonight.